Welcome back, everyone, to episode number 85 of Chatting with Nuts. Honestly, I was kind of shocked to see that it had been so long since this guest had been on, and one of my all-time favorite guests, one of my best friends, and arguably the person I like talking about books with the most, and that is our lovely, great, powerful friend, Johanna from Johanna Reads. Johanna, how are you?
Hey, I am great. How are you doing?
I'm doing pretty darn well, actually. I'm feeling good. I'm a little under the weather tonight, but it's nothing like that would ever make me cancel the show. I think I had COVID like a couple months back, and I did cancel, and I felt terrible about it, but this was not one of those times. But I may mute to cough a little bit, but it's certainly not anything that would harm the show, hopefully. But I'm doing well. You're good, right? Because you live in a part of the country here in the United States that just got absolutely decimated by a hurricane. So you're
Yes,
good? Everything's good?
I'm very fortunate because we were supposed to get the eye of the storm went over us as a tropical storm, but fortunately we didn't get any damage because the storm shifted east. So originally we were projected to be east of Helene, and because of that we were projected to have a very, very severe tropical storm and possibly fallen trees and all that. So we got lucky, but other parts of my state were not so lucky. So last weekend, I was actually over at my in-laws' house, which is like an hour and a half away, where there were just fallen trees everywhere. And so we got there with our chainsaws and started, you know, uh, logging up some trees that had fallen. And it took a long time for just 2 trees. And I'm thinking, gosh, there were so many trees that have fallen. So that's a lot of cleanup. But yeah, I
Yeah.
was very fortunate during that storm.
I saw you had your hair tied up. You were ready to go. I saw your story over on Instagram, and I
Yeah,
said,
great.
what in the world is she doing? And then it dawned on me what was happening, and you were going to be you were role playing as a lumberjack for a day. So,
Yes.
to be honest, now you're not the biggest person in the world, right? I've met you. You're like 4'1", 25, pure muscle, 25 pounds, so how much wood chopping were you really doing down there? I mean,
Well, I'm not a lot, but I did use the chainsaw a couple of times, but to be fair, it was mostly my husband and my father-in-law who were using the chainsaw, but I was picking up some logs, and, that did take some muscle, and I have been trying. I've been trying to look. I've
hey,
been
whoa,
focusing
whoa,
on that.
whoa. What is this? This is what we call toned,
I
okay?
know, I've been working on it. I've been working on it the last few months.
Dude, bro, toned to the bone. I mean, Joanna, every day you get closer and closer to becoming a full-blown dude bro. You're certainly in the graduating class of 2020 dude bros along with me. Murphy even wanted to know, our good friend Murphy wanted to know, do we happen to have any thoughts on the abstract book called Stoner, which is the quintessential dude bro
Mm.
book? There's a lot of people who have no idea what the thumbnail meant for this Chatting with Nuts. And the funny thing about making a thumbnail for a video that hasn't happened yet is that you don't know the topics that were going to come up. But I did know I wanted to bring up dude bro books because we happen to both have some that are classified as that. But for the people at home that are joining us on this wonderful fall Friday evening, could you tell them what a dude bro book is?
That is a good question, isn't it? So I did a video related to this topic not too long ago, and it was about whether books should have a gendered audience or not, and the idea behind a dude bro book, in my opinion, is just a book where the target audience happens to be more male leaning than female leaning. I guess that's the way I would see it. Whereas, like if you did a search, for example, on a book like Stoner by John Williams on YouTube, you might come up with more male reviews than ones by female reviewers, though there are some amazing reviews of Stoner by some awesome female booktubers. So, yeah, I mean, I guess that's how I see the dude bro lit, but I know a lot of people use that term on booktube, and I think I've just kind of adopted it from hearing it over and over again as well. So that's just
Yeah.
my best guess. What about you?
So I've seen a lot of bro lit. I've heard, hey, it's bro lit, which I think encompasses a lot more possibly, but I kind of put them into the same category. But I heard the monumental booktuber Steve Donahue, who's been on this show before, who obviously detests Stoner very, very much. I believe one of the criteria for him is the idea that it has a toxic male or psychopathic male character that is to be idolized, not critiqued. Right.
Hmm.
So the idea is that this dude's sick, like Fight Club, like guys who miss the point of Fight Club. If there is a point, I think that's the argument, is maybe that the critic in this, whoever it might be, would say that it's not meant to be critiqued. It's actually an endorsement of that. So I think that's kind of where it's getting along. And the thing that was kicking around my brain when I was thinking about this is like, could you think of some dude bro fantasy books? Like what classifies as a dude bro fantasy book? I have one in mind, but I'd love to hear your take.
Yeah, so I guess the one that immediately comes to mind is Toll the Hounds by Steven Erikson, I guess in
Okay.
the Malazan series. And I mean, I would say the Malazan series in general, there are more women who are reading the series, and there always have been some women who've really loved that series. But in general, I think that the audience in general does skew more male, I want to say. So
Hmm.
that's going to be my answer for that. And maybe also R. Scott Baker as well.
That
I
was
would
mine.
say
Yeah.
that the
Yeah.
Second Apocalypse series does skew more male.
Yeah, I think it was definitely written from the male perspective, which is something that you've talked about in many of your videos. But also, I think that largely a lot of people did not get the messaging, unfortunately, that Baker was going for. Ironically, I think that Baker was too optimistic about his readership understanding what he was going for. And he thought, well, surely nobody would read this and be like, that's sick. That's what we want. And unfortunately, there is a subset of them that believe that. Now, we don't fall into that cat. And most people I've talked to about the series in depth, Mark It Slowly Read. I think it's Red Viper 21. I hope I remember the name right. Commenter, or just absolutely a ravaging fan of R. Scott Baker's work.
Yes.
Doesn't fall into that. But there is a subset of fans that happen to fall into that category.
Mhm.
So maybe he was a bit too optimistic. Do you feel like when an author actually comes out and says, hey, my intent was to subvert this thing or to make you feel awkward, but we see a large portion or even like, a loud minority, whenever they take it wrong, do you think the author failed in that regard then?
No, I mean, I guess for me, I want to try to judge books on their own merit. I mean, it helps to hear what the author's intent is, but I want to try to see for myself. And I guess for me, when I read The Darkness That Comes Before, I don't think at that point I can't remember. I just can't remember if I knew that he had that intention in mind. I can't remember. But I do remember that when I read book one, although I did understand, okay, this is a very patriarchal world, there's a
Mhm.
lot of misogyny, I was forewarned about those things, and I think that did help. But then also, I felt like the female characters that were in that particular book, like Esmenet, who is a character who plays a prostitute, I felt like he put so much care and attention into her personality, into her inner world, into her inner desires. And even though she didn't have a lot of agency because of the way that particular society was set up, I did feel like it was a critique of that society and it was an endorsement of what she was feeling. That was what I felt as a reader. So I guess that was how when I heard those things, whether I heard them before or after, I did feel like the text supported that from my perspective. So I just try really
Mhm.
hard to try to judge things for myself, not lean too heavily on what the author says, but also take that into consideration. What about you? Do you feel like you want to lean more heavily on what the author says, or do you feel like you want to put that aside as a reader?
Well, that's kind of interesting because I think there is something to be said about knowing intention. Like, there's no way for me personally to find out about an intention or the views or whatever, and then not factor that into the reading because I'm human. Like, it's just impossible for me. But I'm not necessarily always convinced when I hear an author's intent. My thinking of A Little Life and the author's
Oh yeah.
intent behind that book, it actually took me the complete opposite way. In where I was maybe wrestling with that book a little bit and chewing on it, it kind of made me want to spit it out and just walk away from it, never talk about it again, kind of thing. So, which I say that, but I bring it up every single time I'm on here. So obviously, I'm just not telling the truth, I guess, because I keep bringing it up. So I don't know. I don't know how much it bothers me or kind of impacts my view, and if whether or not they succeeded. I'm just always open to other people's experience. I was talking actually today with Murphy about how I think with books and the social aspect of books, and you could extend this to just talking online, but there's a large amount of people who are social with their reading because they're seeking validation for the opinions that they have already set out. And I don't know. I don't know if I like that. I don't know if I even want to be a person that validates people's opinions, because me, I think I'm always trying to express myself in a way to where people can understand where I'm coming from. But I'm hoping that there's someone out there that can either expand my horizons or counter argue me. And I never want to validate anyone's opinions because I'm not an authority on anything. It makes me uncomfortable, actually, to know that people are coming to you for validation.
Interesting. I love that though. I love that especially because I also feel like, well, I don't know, there are certain books that I've certainly loved because I felt like I resonated with those books and that maybe they resonated with things I already believed or thought about the world or certain perspectives I had. But I especially love it when an author can challenge my worldview, when they can challenge me to see things a little bit differently. So
Yeah.
yeah, I think that that's a really good point, and especially about what are they looking for when they go into a book? Are they looking to have their beliefs validated, or are they looking to trying to challenge those things a bit? How are they being challenged?
Yeah, I tend to feel when I'm uncomfortable that I need to like take a second and think about this, because like a lot of people's first reaction whenever they get kind of caught off guard with emotion is kind of to lash out. I don't think that it's not unlikely to happen, but I always want to know, ooh, why did that tug a string with me? Why did that make me feel that way? So maybe that's one of the reasons why I'm kind of attracted to maybe the more toxic characters in books and getting in their head. I think Disgrace is probably the best example I can think of this, right? And that's a book that you've also read. One of the many books that we've read and then conferred in each other afterwards, and being like, this was messed up. This was pretty bad.
Yes, and didn't that feel like a Dude Bro Lit kind of book? I don't know why I get that feeling, but
So there are plenty of books that I have found that are not being like classified that they're dude bro books, but there are books that I feel like should be in that. Like I know so many bros when I tell my read, and I can tell these are guys who are getting their reading recommendations from only certain places, and they're like, dude, Dostoevsky, dude, you gotta read them, dude. And I'm just like, isn't Crime and Punishment in? Because a lot of people take those messages and they take them and warp them or whatever. Not hating on Crime and Punishment necessarily, but it's just one of
right.
the examples. But another one, honestly, would be Disgrace by J.M. Coetzee, who ended up winning the Nobel Prize in literature. And I think for good reason. What a very conflicting read that we had. So male skewed reading and whatnot. It's weird because I always end up thinking, man, Johanna would love this book when I read it, and it has that skew. So in your video talking about like gendered reading, you were kind of wondering, is it okay to direct towards certain audiences? I think that's fine. But have you thought about it anymore? And have you tried to identify why it seems that you do like, dude bro books? Like, why is that?
Oh, I'm constantly questioning that. Yes. So there were several interesting comments in that particular video that made me think more deeply about that. And I think actually even a conversation I had with my mother made me think about that because she's responsible for, well, she and I buddy read Dostoevsky's Crime and Punishment this year, and that's her favorite book of all time. And by the way, she and I buddy read Stoner together, and she loved Stoner. Like we
So
could
dude bro
not,
runs in the family.
it runs in the family. And my mom is definitely very feminine. And yeah, she's not somebody I would necessarily consider. I don't know. It almost would surprise you maybe, but the thing is that I think she brought up is that a lot of, I don't know if she brought this up or if somebody else did, but that if you think about a lot of classics, like the Western canon does seem to be more male, like dominant as far as authors are concerned and perspectives. Now there
Hmm.
are some amazing books that are written by female authors, sadly not enough in my opinion, or people of color in my opinion,
Yeah.
or other other representation in general. But I do think like, yeah, it's a tricky topic because like I've never done it consciously. I've never consciously thought this looks like a dude bro book, therefore I think I'll like it. Like I've never thought that way. In fact, before I even had a channel, I never thought about it. Like I loved Dune, for example,
Yeah.
and I loved, I started reading Malazan before I started a channel or got involved in here, and then it once I started having a channel and I started realizing, oh wow, it seems like the part of booktube I just naturally seem to be in tends to have more males around. Not that that's a bad thing, but it just tends to be the case. And my audience does skew more masculine. So I
Mhm.
don't, so that was where I got to wondering about it, but it's not something I've ever consciously sought out or thought about. And I'm not opposed to reading something that's more like targeted towards female readers either. I think there are plenty of great reads out there.
You just
I
read
want to be
Emily
open to
Henry,
that.
right? Not too long
I
ago.
did. Yeah,
Yeah.
I've read Happy Place. Mhm.
Kelsey was very excited that you read that, by the way.
Aw, yay. Well, I did have some mixed feelings about it, but I did like Emily Henry's writing style quite a bit, and I do plan to read more from her for sure in the future. So, yeah, and I've read, for example, Colleen Hoover before. I'm definitely open to other types of books, but I guess that I really love yeah, I don't know. I don't know what it is. And I feel weird about it because I feel as though, gosh, I have so many thoughts about this. So the one takeaway I did not want people to have from my video, the one takeaway I did not want people to have is that male books equal intellectual and edgy and smart. Female books mean
Mhm.
frivolous and light because women
Yep.
aren't smart and men are intellectual. That was not the takeaway or the messaging I wanted to provide.
I think that
I
that actually does get misconstrued quite a bit. And if anyone feels that way, I would direct you towards our good friend Bookish and his channel because he
yes.
actually reads. It seems like he reads predominantly female authors, and he brings out some great recommendations. And then obviously you read one of his favorite books or favorite authors, I should say, in Toni Morrison, who is everything that you just mentioned and more. She's amazing and certainly intellectual, or someone like an Octavia Butler, for example.
Oh, definitely. Actually, yes, he was influential on me picking up well, I'd already picked up Claire Keegan, who's a Irish female author,
I
but he
just bought
also
the stories that you've read. I picked them up in Ireland based on Yolanda and Carlos's recommendations. So me and Kelsey are going to be reading those hopefully soon. They're very short. So
I'm so excited to hear your thoughts. I loved Claire Keegan's writing style. I think she's incredible. I think you're gonna love it. I think you're gonna love Claire Keegan. And also, yes, Toni Morrison as well. And that's something else too that I've known that I've appreciated on BookTube is when I know you were reading hot girl fiction for a while there. I don't know if I totally know what hot girl fiction is. You could
I
explain that
don't
to me
either,
here in a
actually.
minute.
I'm not sure if I
Oh,
actually understand it either. But what I would say is it's very congruent with the idea of an unhinged protagonist and seeing it from their eyes. Actually, it was Andre earlier in chat. I was going to bring it up, but he said, is it maybe for you, reading these like toxic male POVs or stories, is it maybe the same reason why Jimmy likes hot girl fiction, seeing how the other side thinks and functions? I think
yes.
even for me, I don't even necessarily think about it from the other side. I'm just fascinated with people who are like broken because we're all kind of broken in some way, right? Like I think that isn't such a unnatural occurrence to be drawn towards that sort of thing, maybe.
Oh, totally. Yeah, that makes perfect sense. I do like that. I think as well. And yeah, I do appreciate that though. I love, for example, like what you said about Bookish, because Bookish also read Emily Henry recently,
Mhm.
really enjoyed the book that he read. I think it was Beach Read, I think is the name of the book. And yeah, he's not been afraid to read other types of books that are targeted towards women and have an open mind and get out of the idea that dude bro equals superior or whatever. I can't remember the terminology he uses, but he's definitely a huge inspiration to me. Same thing with Criminali, who I had both of them on YA Read together. Criminali is the same way. He reads a lot of crime, pulp, horror, that kind of thing. That's his motto. And he also has been open to reading YA, to reading books targeted towards women and having a
Hey,
real open mind about it. And I just
book
think that's awesome.
bookish is a plus in my book because we had an awesome conversation here on Chatting with Nuts, and then that dude went and he did the best thing he could possibly do, and he did a Jimmy July. He did Jimmy Stack July, and he didn't even like Game of Thrones, which broke my heart. But
Oh,
like, you know what? I totally get it. And he even actually said in that, he's like, I'm just really not into this type of fantasy anymore. He had other problems, but he's like, at the end of the day, I don't care what these people dress like in this culture, in this culture. And I'm like, you know what? I respect that. I get that. That makes total sense to me. His willingness to like branch out and try new things. I mean, he's probably one of the people that I look to for recommendations outside of my comfort zone because he does such a nice job of pitching them, I think. Philip is wondering if Beowulf is dude bro. And then McScarfield says Gilgamesh, very dude bro.
I love Beowulf.
Beowulf might be dude bro. It might
I
be
think
dude
it
bro.
might. Yeah, yeah. And I know somebody brought up Marcus Aurelius's Meditations earlier,
Yeah,
and I
Brian.
actually
Yeah.
do have that on my TBR for this year. I'll get
Man,
to it at
Alan's
some
going to be
point.
mad. If we do a buddy
Right?
read after this, man, Alan's going to be furious.
Yeah, let's buddy read Marcus Aurelius's Meditations.
I'm going to be honest.
So-
I ain't reading that. I'm not reading that. It sounds terrible.
Well, I started the first part, and I can say I don't know that you would vibe with it. So because it's just like a gratitude list. It's weird.
Yeah,
But
I think I would honestly rather eat dirt. Matt on Book says, so Johanna's a dude bro and Jimmy's a hot girl. I mean, and for this stream, abso-friggin-lutely. And this is an interesting comment, and I don't know how I feel about this, but Carl Zimmerman said, I do think it's the case that nihilism is an extremely male-coded attitude. I would push back on this a little bit as someone who is surrounded by guys who I would classify as toxic masculine in the hobbies that I've had. And actually, whenever I am, because I'm pretty pessimistic overall, maybe a little bit nihilistic, and it's actually considered like a quitter's attitude to be nihilistic around the toxic dude bros that I know. They look down on that type of thing. And it's very much like, you got to pick yourself up by your bootstraps. You can't get down about everything. Everything has meaning because you're at the center of the. So I actually, in my experiences, that's not true. But I think that there's probably a case for that, and I'd have to think on it a little bit more. Do you have any thoughts about that? It's a compelling topic.
yeah, I've never heard of that before. So it sounds almost like a toxic positivity meets existentialism combined.
Yeah, I think Carl's just saying like nihilism tends to be a male coded attitude of that, maybe more of a defeatist way of thinking about things. I don't know.
I don't know.
I think it depends on the culture and the time period. Like, I don't know. Something to think about. I certainly don't have the answers as it is. K-Fox wants you to get me to read The Dispossessed, by the way. I started this comment because I knew that you would be extremely excited to pitch The Dispossessed, especially after Alan's just terrible review of The Dispossessed. I mean, what a stinker of a review from Alan. Am I right?
He was so offensive in that review. Yeah. The Dispossessed is excellent. I mean, that was the first Le Guin I've ever read. But you know this because, we were live on Alan's channel, and I think Laura read a passage, or Alan read a passage, and you had all these insights about what Le Guin was doing with her prose. And it was so dead on. Like, it was good writing, right? I mean, I don't know if you remember that, but
I don't think it has to be necessarily enjoyable, but yeah, I do think that there was a purpose behind it. It wasn't like I'm just gonna write the worst sentence I possibly can. there was a reason behind it. Most people don't care about that stuff, though. To be fair, I don't think the general audiences certainly don't care about it. For instance, in Death of Ivan Ilyich, the chapters get shorter as he approaches death, which is, for me, I think it's genius. Like, I love that. I mean, you're already writing a short story / maybe a novella, so you're underneath that time constraint. Now, was he under that time constraint the whole time? I don't know. But then you add in the idea that you're shortening the chapters as our days just feel shorter and shorter and shorter. And anyone who is at all grown up, I think, can look back and be like, man, the years are going by way too fast. We got to slow this thing down. And it's like this perpetual speeding up of a process. As you slow down, time just happens to lurch forward, and all of a sudden, you're wondering if you should dye your hair. You know what I mean?
I hadn't thought about it that way. I hadn't given it thought about the structure and about time moving forward and his death being imminent. Oh, wow. I love that story, by the way. That is one of my favorite stories I've read this year. I know it's a little unconventional to say a short story is your favorite book of the year kind of thing, but really, it's one of my favorite. It's up there. It's up there.
Yeah, it only got snuffed on my awards, or snubbed rather, because I read Sand Kings, and I just could not put my boy Georgie, down, as he's a huge fan of the show, and I didn't want to disappoint him. And Leo's dead, so he doesn't watch. Unfortunately, he would if he was alive. I believe Leo Tolstoy would be a huge fan of me. I don't believe that, actually. I think he would despise the fact that his books are sold in bookstores because he didn't want that anymore after whenever he was dying.
Didn't know that either.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. He was like, he went way off the scale, like off the radar at the end. You should read. Fascinating guy. Fascinating. I mean, all the Russian authors are fascinating to me. Super Gainsborough, which is my buddy Matt from Bend the Knee, said, love the new background. Matt, thank you. Matt actually made this background. And the new logos that you guys are seeing on my banners on my page and everything are made by our good friend, the Bee's Knees, who's always in the comments, is a wonderfully, beautifully talented artist. And I commissioned some art from her. I love it. I think everyone else has loved it besides Alan because he hates change. And we are sending Bees the best wishes because she was affected by the hurricane that just happened 2 days ago. So shouts out to her for the art, but also we're wishing you and your family the best as they try to recover from 2 massive storms back to back down there in the South. So
Yeah. Sending thoughts to everyone who's been affected by the recent hurricane.
Besides Alan, yeah. Brent says, how to get Jimmy to read Meditations. Tell him it's a book 1. That's a deep cut, man. That's a deep cut, bro.
Where is that coming from?
Because I've started like last year at the beginning of the year, I made a video saying I was in the middle of 37 series, and I've doubled that probably in the last year. Yeah, well, it's not my fault, Johanna. It's not my fault. 1, y'all got to write better book 1s to get me to read book 2. But 2, I'm kidding. But 2, the Patreon will every time it's a book 1, every single time. Give me some standalones on the old list, and I think people are conspiring against me, to be honest.
Yeah.
You know,
I've been wondering about that for a while with your Patreon.
No, they're absolutely. And sometimes I just want a taste. I just want a little taste of a series. I don't want a whole series. Sometimes I just want to see what the fuss is about. I'm reading Dungeon Crawler Carl right now, and I just want to see what the hubbub's about. I'm probably not going to continue, but I needed to check it out because I want to know why people love it so much. So,
I need to hear your thoughts on that. Because
well, first off,
genre I have not touched.
I'm gonna cover it in my wrap up stream that I'm gonna do at the end of the month. So I have a lot of thoughts about Dungeon Crawler Carl and the reason why maybe it's so popular. But to give you a baseline, good time. I'm having a good time. Cool premise. Some of the RPG stuff that I wasn't so sure about, kind of like it. But the bigger point here, Johanna, is LitRPG is absolutely real. And I know there's going to be people who've been reading LitRPG for like 5 years, but like, yes, we already knew that. But I did. Okay, I didn't. I've learned and I've grown in this last month. BellTube, to me, is the guy that I go to for LitRPG. I know Daniel Green just put out a video, but BellTube's been on this train for a bit, right? And he's been making videos about it. I mean, he's definitely a go-to guy. He's read a lot of LitRPGs, not 5, 6, 7. I mean, this dude's read a lot of LitRPGs. And I truly believe that it is like the hype's real, I guess. And I don't mean from me being like over the moon about the books. I'm talking about just the genre in general, the subgenre of LitRPG. And here's why. So when I went to buy Dungeon Crawler Carl, because I'm thinking, okay, I can get a first edition, right? It might be worth money if it gets an adaptation because Seth MacFarlane is doing it, supposedly going to work on an adaptation for this thing, which could be huge because I do think it fits his humor profile. But I was shocked. So when you go in your bookstore, let me ask you this, Johanna. When you go in your bookstore, how many people do you see in the fantasy sci-fi section usually? Like on any given day? Yeah, just like random. Like how many would you say are there with you?
Like 3.
Okay. Okay. And out of those 3, are they usually all buying the same book?
No.
Exactly. I went in, and this is like off time to the bookstore. And I'm like, I'll go get Dungeon Crawler Carl real quick. My God, there were 2 people there buying Dungeon Crawler Carl and the sequel. And I'm like, I have never been in a bookstore where the 2 people buying it once was not Sarah J. Maas, Brandon Sanderson, George R. Martin, or J.R. Tolkien. That's it. Those are the only ones I've ever seen multiples of, and it's usually during the holiday times where everyone's just rushing in for stocking stuff or whatever, right? Two people buying the first and second. They weren't together, and I was there buying it too. And I said, okay. I said that's now you might be thinking, Jimmy, that's pretty anecdotal. Yes, but I was still kind of shocked, right? Yeah. So then I go pay for it on the counter. Guy goes, oh, we're selling a lot of these. I said, okay, that's weird. Like that's kind of weird. So I'm in Las Vegas last weekend. I'm at a beautiful brunch spot in the Venetian Casino called Chica. getting brunch with my good friend Tanner and his girlfriend Mandy. We had a wonderful time. Got to meet him. Actually, I met him through the channel. So he drove 5 hours to see me. It was crazy, and we had a great time. So we're at Chica, and this guy comes up, and he's kind of, it's the manager. I basically wanted to rave about the restaurant and how much I enjoyed it. So he comes over to talk to us. He goes, how'd y'all meet? I said, oh, we met through a book club because I'm embarrassed I have a YouTube channel. So I just said book club. And he goes, oh, what do you read? And I'm like, oh, here we go. And I go, I like fantasy and sci-fi mostly, but I read anything. He said, have you ever heard of LitRPG?
Oh,
and I'm like, what is going on right now? Like, wow. I'm in Las Vegas. This is a manager of a high-end, like a really nice restaurant. And he's like, have you heard of LitRPG? I go, yeah, I have. He goes, man, you got to read Dungeon Crawler, Carl. And I'm like, son of a... And he's talking about that Kickstarter. He almost paid $1,000 to get his name mentioned in a book. If you paid like $1,000, you could like get your name mentioned in one of the books and get killed on page or some madness. I don't know what it was. And he's like, I'm thinking like, should I do it, bro? And I'm just sitting there like, this is happening. This is a thing. This is crazy. And it's become like that new, like, well, I don't like fantasy, but I like this. You know what I'm saying? Like, I don't like fantasy, but I like Game of Thrones, like that feeling, right? Or I only like Lord of the Rings. And he kind of gave me that vibe a little bit where he's like, I only like LitRPG. So all of this is extraordinarily anecdotal. And yes, Tanner, that is you, my friend. This is all very anecdotal. But I think that there is definitely some steam behind this hype train. I think it's real.
That is wild. Well, thanks to BellTube, I actually have some clue about this because I feel so out of touch right now, honestly, that it's that hyped and I didn't realize it. Wow.
Yeah, and and BellTube's out there doing the Lord's work because he's reading all of it. Good, bad, ugly, it doesn't matter. He's going through and trying to show people, hey, this genre has some stuff to offer, which is really cool, right? Brent said, man, I tried Dungeon Crawler Carl, and after the 5,000th mention of loot boxes, I wanted to KMS. And I will say, whenever I review it at the end, I'm not done with it yet. Hell, I might not even finish it this month. I've been listening to it like 30 minutes at a time, like when I'm practicing putting. I'm like, I'll just put on the audiobook kind of thing. I have read some of it physical, but I have feelings up and down about it. It's certainly not a gonna be book in the top books. It's not even close, but I see the appeal. And it is, I have fun, I'm having fun. It's pretty good, pretty fun. Like a lot of the RPG elements did not bother me anywhere near as bad as I thought they would. I really didn't. And Alan is here and he said, your mom is Dungeon Crawler Carl, which is super rude because Mrs. Nuts is always watching. Mrs. Nuts is my wife, actually, Mama Nuts. So Alan can't even get the titles around here right. He was on Talking Story last night. He turned his back on me. You believe this?
I saw that. Yes. And I'm sure that you'll hear more from him too, because he's going to be on my channel on Tuesday night for the BookTube betrayal tag.
So what are you guys just going over all the ways that he's been betrayed?
Yeah, we came up with 10 questions. It started on the live stream that we did for the Mid-Year Freakout tag. And he started trying to write down the prompts. And I was like, well, let's just do this. Why not? So a lot of people are probably going to hear Alan's anger, hear his wrath, feel his wrath on Tuesday night if they tune in.
I feel like I will definitely be on that list, and I look forward to trolling the ever living shit out of that chat. I'm actually very excited. I'm very, very excited about it.
Please do.
You said that's Thursday?
That's a Tuesday night.
Okay, Tuesday. I get my Tuesdays and Thursdays mixed up at times.
Me too. I do it all the time.
And Matt has a very good point here. It says, Dungeon Crawler Carl just made me constantly ask myself, why am I not playing a video game? I think that's fair. I've heard a lot of people say this about D&D as well. People say, D&D, why wouldn't I just play a video game? And they always have an answer for it. I don't have the answer, but I definitely think that it's maybe not an acquired taste, but a very specific taste. And Brent's saying, I'm not a gamer, so maybe that's it, but the LitRPG is just not for me. And that's going to be certainly the thing. Someone mentioned romantasy, right? Mm-hmm. And romantasy, again, is another like kind of subgenre now branching off of fantasy, and it's very popular. Do you find it odd the disdain people have for like things like a LitRPG? And I don't think LitRPG has quite hit the disdain level by any means. Certainly not anyone here. But I do see a lot of negative sentiment about romantasy and how it's, terrible for bookstore, and I just see people harping on, like, am I am I being apathetic when I say I just don't care that much
About like being
about going into
again.
the store and you know, romantasy sells, so they put it there, and I just don't. It doesn't bother me at all. I don't
Doesn't bother
care.
me either. It does not bother me at all.
God, we're
And
so
it is
cool.
actually, I mean, like, it is so popular to the point where I was talking with my sister, and she said that, "Oh, I was talking with my pharmacist, and they were, um, they were talking about this series by, this series, something to do with a court and roses." And I'm like, "Oh, yeah, yeah, I've heard of that." And that they were so into it. And then my sister-in-law started getting into it, was like binging the books. And I think that's great. Like, if people enjoy what they enjoy, if it's getting people to read, like that's all I care about. So I think that's awesome. But I
Yeah,
do not care. It does not bother me at all to see a romantasy section in a bookstore.
yeah. I don't know about. I mean, I feel like you might be on the same page as me here, and that's probably because we like a lot of the same stuff. But like, all my favorite authors aren't even in the like. They're not in the bookstores.
No, they aren't. Yeah.
Have you ever
As
seen a Guy
far as
Gavriel K book in your local bookstore ever?
I haven't. No, in used
Never.
bookstores, but not in new bookstores. But I was going to say about the Dungeon Crawler Carl, and the Lit RPG stuff. I might try it at some point just because I want to be in the know a little bit. But I do suspect I might be similar to the comment that you brought up before. In that, so this, oh, and Matt's comment specifically, because I feel like I love playing video games every now and then. But the weird thing is, my taste in video games is so opposite than my taste in books. I'm sure you're going to be different than me about this.
Okay.
But like, when I read books, I love like fantasy books. I don't mind slow burn. I don't mind world building and
Yeah.
different cultures, all the things that Bookish said that he's just not into right now. Like, I love that kind of stuff. But when I play a video game, I actually just want to get my boots on the ground and think strategy and beat up some bad guys. I just want to get into the action. Like, all I care about is the action. All I care about is the strategy. And yeah, I just, that's my thing. I don't really care that much about the story. I don't really want to slow down. I just, I actually, I play a lot of video games with my husband because, when it comes to those elements of like leveling up and putting on armor and doing specific store stuff and merchandise and deciding what power you want to level up. I like let him do all that because I don't have patience. I'm weird that way. But I don't know why I'm like that. Like, I'm
Well,
totally
you get your
impatient when
fix
it
from
comes to
books.
games.
You get your fix from books. You're
Yes.
going in for a different level of entertainment and engagement. I know. I totally get it. I mean, it's actually rare where I go, man, this video game story is really captivating me. Like, very rare that happens. Which is probably why I tend to play more action-driven games like the Souls franchise and whatnot. I know you're playing Skyrim in 3D.
Well,
You're.
my husband is. He's playing Skyrim in the VR. Yeah.
I don't
And
know if people know that about you. You're quite the gamer.
I'm not though. I'm
You
not really
kind of
that much of
are.
a gamer. But I do want to play Baldur's Gate 3 sometime. Like, you convinced me that sounds like a fun game.
We
So
should play it together because
yes,
Alan just abandoned me on our playthrough.
I was gonna suggest that.
We should do that. That would be great. Yeah, Alan actually offered to play with John last night. So me and Alan have broken up pretty much officially.
There
So
you go.
I think that would be a fantastic thing. There are a couple people here that have some opinions about things we were talking about, and I kind of want to bring them up. So Brett says it only bothers me. Speaking of romantasy, he said it only bothers me from the perspective that there may be less of what I enjoy being published traditionally and having to sort through the slush pile of self-pub to find good books. I do believe I actually see this point, right? It's the idea that there's not a romantasy section, but it's thrown in with fantasy. Therefore, less people may be getting featured, or publishers are going to be publishing less traditional, whatever it might be, right? I could see this. I think that this is somewhat of a valid argument, or if not a wholly valid argument. I would love to speak with a publisher and not, get it secondhand from like Library of a Viking or something. Like, literally talk to a publisher, someone that works in this daily, and talk to them and just be like, hey, does the budget of romantasy like impact the budget of signing fantasy authors? Because I don't know that to be true or false. I don't know. I don't think many of us know. And I would be curious, because if so, then maybe, hey, like the wants and needs of the romantasy crowd probably differ from the avid fantasy that's been around for like 20, 30 years, right? So I could see maybe that feeling bad, right? That you're not going to get these other people published because of this or whatever. But it's also just the nature of the system we live in. But I would love to talk to a publisher and find out. I think that would be very interesting. And if anyone works for a publisher and you watch the show, let me know. I would love to bring, if you're comfortable, I'd probably get you fired. So I don't know if you would want that. And Krista has a comment that I wanted to bring up. Said, I'm going to say it. There's a lot of people that hate on anything women like. And one thing I do believe, and I see this a lot online, is that it is a really easy, if younger, I usually think teenage girls enjoy something, it is guaranteed upvotes to go and dunk on this thing, right? Like we could talk about Twilight. We could talk about Taylor Swift. I don't know if Rebecca Black, who made the Friday song, qualifies. I think that was just an absolute stinker of a song. But it is very easy to catch an upvote for making, fun of very excited, fainting girls over Justin Timberlake or something like this. Like that does happen quite a bit. But then we want to fight for our right for adult fantasy and taking it serious in my cosplay as I walk through Ireland with a Stark cloak, I should also be made fun of in that regard. And I'm okay with that, by the way. I'm totally fine if someone wants to mock me for it. But I don't think that this is outlandish. I think that this is certainly some part of it. And also there's a stigma against romance, for sure. Maybe it's one of those things where we don't love to be ridiculed for liking fantasy, but at least we're not the romance readers like that. I get that vibe from a lot of the streams and stuff I watch in this corner of booktube, and it always just rubs me the wrong way, especially because my wife reads romantasy. She enjoys it, but guess what? She's reading Game of Thrones. She's read a bunch of Robin Hobb. She's read a ton of fantasy, a ton of other things as well. And one of the sentiments that I've seen passed around with it is that it is supporting anti-intellectualism, and that people who do this have a certain viewpoint are ruining the world. And I'm just laughing because my wife's over there reading Sarah J. Maas, and she's the smartest person I've ever met and has a master's degree and is excelling in a male-dominated field as a female because of how smart she is and how well-spoken she is. I don't think that she is contributing to any anti-intellectual. She's actually doing work daily that changes the world in a positive way. It's not that deep. I guess that's what I'm trying to say. I'm not saying there aren't concerns. I'm not saying that. But to lay a blanket over the whole thing is just preposterous to me.
I have so many issues with that too. Gosh, where do I even begin with that? One, just like what you said with Kelsey, I've known so many people. There are so many people you can point to on BookTube. There are people on BookTube, for example, who love A Court of Thorns and Roses alongside Malazan Book of the Fallen. Like that's not impossible. Like these things don't have to be at odds with one another. Now I can understand if publishing is going through a certain trend, but overall, like people can enjoy both. And the other thing too, when you mentioned Kelsey, it got me thinking about this too, because I have a video and I didn't publish it. And I don't know if I should at some point. It's kind of old at this point. I recorded it and I was like, I don't know, maybe I shouldn't publish it. But it was about the topic, do books define you? And do you judge? And the other sub question to that is, do you judge people by what they read? Because the fact of the matter is, somebody could be reading, some kind of popcorn fiction, or they could be reading any type of book that people consider not the most erudite type of book. And they could be like a brain surgeon or a rocket scientist.
Mm-hmm.
And that's just their form of entertainment. That's just their escapism that has no reflection on what they're contributing to society, how intelligent they are. It's just a pastime. Like you said, I think people just take that way too seriously. And I think it's also something that people do a lot when it comes to booktube. And I feel like I'm kind of guilty of this myself because I have a bookshelf behind me and people are going to look at that bookshelf and they're going to look at the books behind me. And to some degree, they're going to judge me based on what the books they see and make some sort of assessment of me as a person based on what they see on that shelf. But I'm saying, like, I just don't think that those two things are always correlated.
Mm-hmm. I agree. And I think that's why it's important to listen to people when they talk about things, because a lot of times the maybe even concerns you might have with someone that's someone's enjoying, they can make a case for it. LitRPG, I had absolutely zero intentions of ever reading any of it until I heard BellTube talk about it. And I said, you know what? Maybe I'll stop being a grouchy old man and I'll give it a shot. Why not? And also, I'm going to eventually read some Sarah J. Maas or something because my wife has read them, and I forced her to read Game of Thrones. I shouldn't say forced. I never forced her, but she took interest in my stuff. Why would I not try to take interest in her stuff and be entertained and have something to talk about? You know, it's not the end of the world, I guess. Like, but I also know that maybe I'm being slightly dense and difficult in my staunchness of defending it. So I'm sure that there's other aspects of this I'm not considering. I always know that I'm probably wrong. Next is Zen said, dude, who cares about the stigma? That stuff blows normal fantasy sales out of the water. There's no stigma at this point. Yeah, and at the end of the day, especially in an industry like reading that has taken a lot of hits over the last 2 decades, they're going to do with what sells so that they can stay in business. And that's the reality of it. So
exactly.
I know it is a lifeblood to my local bookstore who I buy Glenn Cook books. Glenn Cook books. That sounds weird. It sounds like cookbook. I bought all
Joseph
my
reads. I always laugh at his channel.
Oh, he's the number one Glenn Cook aficionado. I mean, there's no one that likes Glenn Cook. He might be Glenn Cook. I don't know. He could be Glenn Cook just cosplaying. I'm not sure, but I definitely know that store has done a midnight release of stuff, and they do a like wine bar, and they pair it with romantasy, and they do a singles. Like, there's a bunch of stuff going on over there based through the romantasy genre. But you go in there, and guess what? They got Ishiguro sitting out the front. They even have David Mitchell. They got Glenn Cook, Wuthering Heights. They have Malazan. They had R. Scott Baker. Like, they got everything there. So when you go in, you know, oh, okay, let's try this out. Maybe we'll see. I know I bought, like I said, my Black Company books from there. I bought a bunch of LitFic from there. So I'm glad that that genre is succeeding, because for me, I can go there and buy these other books I want. So that's a good thing. I want that cool bookstore to be there, not just, you know, Waterstones or Barnes & Noble or whatever it is. Brent says, I definitely don't think romance or romantasy or lowbrow or anything, just not my taste. Generally, it's more fun when things I personally like are popular with more variety. Absolutely, dude. 100%. You know, for me, fantasy is more fun whenever it's more in the Joe Abercrombie cycle than the Sando cycle. I don't hate Sando, but I love Joe Abercrombie. I'd like to see a little more Joe Abercrombie. That'd be great. But it's all a cycle. It all comes out and through. It's just sometimes when I hear, I mean, really, honestly, it's other YouTubers, and they it's like free karma points. You know, we're fighting for fantasy, and it's like, well, we're really not fighting it. Like, there's really not a fight.
No. Yes, they're not. They don't have to be at war with one another. I take major issue with that for sure. I had a question for you about that too, because I know that when you were, I want to say it was when you were talking to Philip on Chatting with Nuts, you two brought up the idea that, or the concept of literacy when it comes to like more women read than men read, especially young women read over men. And you said you had some thoughts about why that was, like why there aren't more male readers. And I wanted to hear your thoughts, and I wondered if you would mind sharing about that.
Well, I think it's predominantly because video games are really sick and marketed towards males for the most part. Like, I tell you, everyone's like, oh, why did you stop reading for so long? It's like, do you realize Xbox Live came out whenever I was like 13? My life was over. It was like Battle Rifle, Halo 2, or reading the Silmarillion. I'm 13. I'm going through puberty. Things are going on I don't understand with my body. I'm gonna play Halo and then watch MTV. Like, it was a no-brainer. And, you know, video games appeal to that certain mindset or period of your life, I guess. And then some people, you know, I game still and I love it. I get something out of it, which is great. But I also do believe that right now, a lot of the influence on teenage boys, and I don't say this as my own thoughts, I've heard this and I've looked into this, they're very influenced by some of the more toxic masculinity things that you see. I'm thinking, you know, the Andrew Tates of the world, and you know, this is what it takes to be a man. Because when you're 15, 16, you're just trying to figure it out, dude. And especially if you're not the quintessential, you know, manly man, and you're playing starting quarterback or whatever. Alan talks about how he's not the perfect Southern gentleman and how hard that was for him. Well, now you got someone telling you that they got all the keys, they got all the answers to that, and nowhere in there is there anything about reading widely and deeply. Not a
he's like anti-reading, isn't he? Andrew Tate?
I mean, I'll probably try to read Dostoevsky. I mean, that seems to be that camp's kind of go-to, I guess. But I guess for me, that's kind of what I feel, and I would say that maybe the reach of that is like maybe overemphasized until I heard from people working with teenage boys and multiples, and them saying how much they're seeing this in the classrooms. And I'm not reading this is a beta thing to read, which is by the way, that is hilarious. Like, let's be fair, that's a really funny thing to say. I'm not reading Guy Gabriel K. That's beta. Like, that's so funny. But but I'm gonna follow up with it's also tragic. It's also tragic because these are like they're not saying it ironically. They're saying it with their chest. I'm the alpha male in this classroom. I'm not reading. That's terrible. But it's also kind of fun. Like, if I did that, it would be funny. I would like to think. So that's my thoughts about that. I'm sure there are other aspects to this, and I think that someone like Bridger from Library Letter, who works with libraries, and I know Rebecca, my friend Rebecca, works in a library. I'm sure they have way more elegant things to say about it, but that seems to be one of the more concerning patterns among young males that are trying to get into reading. Well, they're not even trying. Actually, they're just not reading.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's my nephew, for example. My nephew is incredibly brilliant. Like, he won the science fair for his region in Texas, and
wow.
and yet and he reads sometimes. He tried to read Dune, he couldn't quite get through it, but he plays video games all the time. But I feel like he's still doing really well in school. Somehow the strategies, I guess, that he's using in the video games, they do seem to be transferring for him. I don't know. Um, but I do wonder about it because at one point I was thinking about him and I went into Barnes and Noble and I went into the young adult section, which, by the way, I've heard that young adult sales are declining. I don't know if that's true or not, but I went into the young
Interesting.
adults. Yeah, actually, I do have some thoughts about that. I'll put a pin in that and get back to that in a second. But when I went into the young adult section and I looked around at the books, I did notice a lot of books that seemed to have like female protagonists written by female authors and that looked like they were targeted towards either female readers or, there's also some really great representation in YA. That's something I really appreciate about YA. So, like, going into either non-binary representation or, LGBTQ representation, which is great, but not necessarily anything male targeted specifically towards a male reader. And I and the thing about that is when I talk to people, and actually you might be even an example, I'm not sure.
Oh boy.
I feel like most of the guys I knew when growing up, Dune was one of their first books, or at least when I was a teenager, most of them had read Dune. I'll say that when they were teens, and then most of the guys I also know who were into reading read Stephen King when they were like 9 or 10 years old.
Oh,
And
my buddy Kev, who's usually in the chats, he's probably at the dirt races tonight. But like Kev, I did that. I know a
yeah,
lot of us who read Stephen King in 10, 11 years old. Yeah.
that's what I mean. And I'm like, I have some mixed feelings about that because like I just finished It today, the book It by Stephen King, and there are some things in that book that I don't know how a 9, 10-year-old boy would process.
I
And
put
I
it
know
down. It gave me nightmares. So the beginning of it, this is not really spoilers in the first section, but there is a hate crime on a homosexual, and it rocked me to my core. I mean, I think I'd have to ask my mom. I know I've told the story. I was 10 or 11. And the librarian's like, "Are you sure you're supposed to take this out? Call your mom." I called my mom. Mom said, "Yeah, let him sign it. I don't care." And I read it and I stayed up for like 2 straight days because it actually terrified me that human beings were so bad. Like, it wasn't the clown, it wasn't the supernatural. I was like, I could, like, I could be killed. Like, I don't know why. It just like sparked something in my brain, and it did. It really rocked me. But I'm kind of glad I read that at 10 and 11 years old. Like, I'm kind of glad I did. Because I read this horrible thing that happened, and I certainly didn't go, yeah. I said, this is horrible. Why would someone treat another human being like this? Like,
Yes.
so there was a lesson there, I guess. I hope.
Yeah. And this is a tricky topic because I'm sure it comes down to the individual. I'm sure that some individuals like you could read that and be horrified and get the right idea behind that. I guess it just depends, though. I always think it's like maybe it's a depends situation. My
Uh,
husband read it at age 11, or he started it, I think, at age 11 or 12. He DNF'd it because he felt at a certain point he just felt found it a little too adult or something.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know. It's just a question that I have. Like, but the other thing about it is, I mean, if I were, I could see myself picking up Stephen King if I didn't see books that were targeted towards my age group. I
Yeah.
feel like there were books targeted towards my age group when I was that age. So I can understand that. And at the same time, like, I'm conflicted about it because on the one hand, there's something to be said about you being an 11-year-old boy reading
Yeah.
an adult fiction novel, and your literacy level. On the other hand, like, the content and how you're processing that. Now, my husband said, "Oh, I don't think most kids would even think that deeply about it or consider it." But I'm like, "I don't know." Like, it's just a question mark I have.
Well, kids develop at different rates and stuff, but I mean, I will say, a lot of kids do lack empathy, and you can see it on the playground. You're like, geez, like,
Yeah.
this is prison rules here. This is insane. But there are the few that bubble up to the top. And like, for instance, my buddy Kev, he read King really young, and it set him off to want to be a writer. And he just was
Oh, wow.
writing and writing and writing and writing. And for him, yeah, I think it's a net positive. Uh, for,
Yeah.
for most people. But I am just flabbergasted that I read that at that age and was able to pull that out of it, especially for the area that I lived in at the time of my life. Like, but in some ways, I'm kind of thankful for it. You know,
I'm sure. Yeah, and the guys I knew who read Stephen King at a young age, I mean, they seem to do well. Like, they seem pretty well adjusted as far as that's
old
concerned. Like,
Stevie.
yeah. Old
we have
Stevie.
we have some super chats here. Simon Dinosaur, one of my patrons, said, I'm hyped for Jimmy to one day read SJM. I will, and I will have Kelsey on, and we'll talk it through, and I'll have complaints, and she'll tell me to shut up, and it'll be great. And also, Simon, thank you for the 5 spot. It's very kind of you. And Justin, also with the 5 spot, says, thank you, Jimmy, for being you. Because of your encouragement, I have found a new purpose in life and motivation to become and be better. So,
Wow.
those are always very touching messages. I'm just a jackass on this mic. So it always like takes me back because I'm just saying the things that kind of come natural to me. And I try to make some jokes every now and then that absolutely bomb. But when I see something like that, it means a lot. So thank you, Justin. Thank you. It's very, very kind of you. And it is not lost on me when people say things like that. So thank you so much. I genuinely appreciate it. We have so many thoughts from chat here about these topics. I think these are what the kids call hot button topic. I don't think kids say that at all, actually. First off, I do want to call this out while we have a ton of people watching. Alan said, everyone go buy The Way of the Dan audiobook on Audible. Alan's audiobook performance is now published and live. You can go give it 1 star if you want. Don't do that. Not even as a joke. Don't do that. Give the man what you think he deserves. I think it was a 5-star performance. I'm listening to it and absolutely loving it. I had no doubt that Alan would deliver whenever I heard the samples, and I have the utmost confidence that if you go and check it out, you're most likely going to have a really great time in Philip's world of a Dan, with it being narrated by one of the more talented people I've met in my life, which is Alan. So go check that out. It's Way of a Dan audiobook on Audible.
And it's a great fall read.
Yes, it is. I will say that. It is a great fall read, 100%. The Bee's Knees, who is the artist who did my lovely icons, and we give plenty of shout out to her as I did earlier in the show. It says, it makes me sad that people think there's nothing to be taken away from romance either. There are plenty of life lessons and ideas you can see in romance, even though that's what's focused on is the more spicy. Yeah, I would agree with this. And I think I told the story one time on the show about a commenter who was really aggressive towards me about how fantasy was actually truly a waste of time to read. And I kind of, instead of being like, hey, screw you, dude, I was like, hey, I just want you to know, like, these are the things I've gotten out of reading. And I kind of quoted some things about various series that I've read. And he was like, you got all that from reading a fantasy book? And I said, yeah. He commented back like a month later and was like, I just started Assassin's Apprentice. And I'm like, what? I mean, this guy ripped me. Like, he could basically call me beta male. And I was just like, okay, dude, like, it's on some random other channel comment section. And I could have just toasted him, right? Called him a moron, threatened to choke him, whatever. But instead I was like, you know what? I'm gonna be nice. And I responded. And then now maybe he's here right now. I don't know. If so, hey, Road, what's going on? So, but the thing is that he was like flabbergasted I had gotten something of value out of fantasy. So there's no doubt in my mind that you can pull something out of a spy thriller or or romance or any of the genre fictions. They're still there. Tad Williams said something that resonated with me. And by the way, I just finished Into the Narrow Dark. Slammer, wonderful book. Can't wait for book 4 next month. But Tad Williams said something, and he said that he believes that there are genre fiction writers that are just writing the genre fiction. They put dragons on covers, they sell books, or a spy thriller has a gun on a cover, it sells. However, the people who are at the top of those genres, there's not that much of a degree of difference between them and then someone that's doing well in lit fic. That they're all just great authors doing their own thing with their own recipe and their own tools. And I believe that to be true. We see it in fantasy a lot when someone excels so well in the craft of writing that then they're like, oh, well, this isn't fantasy. David Mitchell is literary fiction.
Yeah.
And we know that David Mitchell is a huge Ursula K. Le Guin fan. He loves fantasy and sci-fi. And he writes it in every one of his books almost. So, he's not the one pulling away from the labels. Now, I do know Ishiguro actually was worried about the Buried Giant being considered fantasy. He was a little nervous about that. So he's a little snobby. And Ursula K. Le Guin windmill slammed him about it and hated the book. I'm probably still going to like the book. I'm going to be honest with you. I think Ishiguro is pretty amazing. Snobbery aside, I don't really care about that. But, there's something to be taken from the best of the genre, for sure.
I wonder if he's changed his views about that, because I watched an interview with
Probably
him
not.
a couple of years ago, and it was interesting to hear him. Like, he wasn't against his books having, for example, sci-fi or fantasy aspects to them, but he didn't want to feel confined by genre either, is the impression I got. Either way.
Even if he is, I mean, the man
Yeah.
has written books that have touched me, and I think that are just fabulous books. So I'll give him a pass for it. And people can have their own opinions about these things, right? They don't have to
Yeah,
agree with me.
it's true.
Philip says, there is a host of factors in the difference between young male and female readers it's worth writing books about. But I agree with Jimmy that our culture has a weird perception of reading as weak. Very beta to finish books. Remember that when you're setting your Goodreads goals. Brent says, I read something once, read something once that grimdark books struggle when people feel like real life times are hard because they want to escapism, so they see a shift to things like cozy fantasy makes some sense. 1000% agree with you. 100% agree with you. There are times wherever I'm kind of down and out and I actually lean into it and I'm like, somebody's got to have it worse than me. I need to read something. And actually I find a little bit of like it's almost like cathartic to read about someone struggling, and I actually double down. But there have been times in my life where I said, I'm in such a bad headspace. I can't read this dark stuff right now. Like, give me Legends and Lattes. Give me something else for a little bit. And I know for you, you talk, I know it was terrible, but you had the death of your cat, your lovely cat, and it deeply affected the way that you were reading, right?
It did. I'll say this. I was so grateful that I read Pet Cemetery last year and
Oh
not
my
this year.
God.
I don't think I could have, gosh, because I love that book. It's one of my all-time favorite books. It's one of my favorite King books of all time.
Yeah.
But I couldn't stop thinking about the book when it happened,
Mm.
and it would have been way too much. It just, there's no way I could have done it this year. There's no
Yeah,
way.
and it would have irrevocably changed the way that you look at that book, and it's not something you certainly wouldn't be reaching for it at that
Yeah,
moment, right? So
yeah.
I think that makes a ton of sense, Brent. T. Baggins says, it's so ironic because illiterate historically are the easiest to oppress. Literacy as a matter of power and freedom. Yeah, this is the biggest hole in Sanderson's world building in the Stormlight Archive, actually, is that the men are not allowed, they don't read, the women
Yeah,
read,
that's right.
but the men are in
Yeah.
charge. And I got news for you. If the men couldn't read, they would not be in charge. They would not in the society that he had set up. I actually think it's one of the dumber things in Stormlight.
That's really a good point.
It,
That's a big
I've
pull
heard other
there.
people point it out. I've seen it on Reddit. I think I've seen Kyle talk about it before, but like it is really a problem with the series, I think. B says, every guy I know from school got into reading by marathoning A Song of Ice and Fire. And I remember when these books were very popular, they were also called trash books. These are trash books. Don't waste your time on them. But now that they're older, they're better, apparently, right? Like now it's like, oh no, they're classics now. And
Were they called trash books when the show was coming out too, or do you think the show affected the perception of them?
I think the show obviously helped the show. The show helped the books, no doubt. But still, when people were raving about it, even when the show was coming, and people were raving about, oh, don't read, that's trash, that's fantasy. And then people would defend and say, oh, I don't like fantasy, I just like this. This is different.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, we have Thomas Covenant, we have Black Company, we have Malazan, we have Baker. We have all these people who are publishing books, that are just as raw or gritty or whatever. Or, the term realistic gets thrown around, which is kind of crazy in a series that has dragons and blood magic, but whatever. These are people who are ignorant to the genre. They're just not that well read in the genre. And I feel like the people I talk to a lot of them, the people who doubt the genre and the quality of it generally are not very well read in the genre. They might be well read, but they're not well read in fantasy.
Or not. Yeah, no, I completely agree with that. I
Yeah.
agree with that for sure. I talked about this with my mom at one point because she's not well read in fantasy at all, and she kind of stuck her nose up at one point until we read Piranesi together, and then she really enjoyed that book. But I asked her, I said, "Why do you think you have a bias against fantasy?" And she said, "Well, to me, it just seems like, things are going bad, then a dragon's gonna come along and save the day." And I'm like, "Oh wow." Just plot armor, basically.
Yeah,
That's
that
the
hasn't
perspective.
been the case in a long time in fantasy.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, in fact, when people write that now, it's a reprieve from the normal.
It is. Yeah.
Sometimes we read a book and we say, just give me somebody to hate, for Christ's sake. I don't need to know that they're actually a good person down deep and they're doing the right. Sometimes I just want to hate a character.
Yeah.
And that's one of the reasons why I do enjoy, or I enjoyed Faithful and the Fallen so much. I enjoyed hating a lot of those characters. They were very hateable people, and
Oh,
it
I
was
want to hear
fun.
about this. I'm so curious. So what, because I haven't read Faithful and the Fallen. Is there any way you could tell us, spoiler free, what made those particular characters hateable? Because this is something I've been curious about lately. Like, what makes a good villain? Um,
Just putting themselves ahead of everybody and doing the worst
mm,
possible thing, cowardice. No one likes a coward. That's why whenever someone calls you a coward, you pretty much have to fight them, right? Like, that's the one time where everyone's like, yeah, you probably should swing on them. Like, no one wants to be called a coward ever. And there's just cowards and people who are doing the wrong thing to get a leg up on other people who are betraying like years of trust in a village. I mean, it's just that stuff. Now, what I will say is while the villains are mustache twirly, very one-sided, whatever, people do those things. People undercut each other that they've known for years to get a leg up on something that might not even have value in a few years. Like, those are traits of people that do exist. Uh, Usually there's some sort of repentance, hopefully, or I don't know, kind of looking into your actions and having regret. But not a
yeah.
lot of these villains do. A lot of these villains are
Ah,
just nasty people and riding the wave of what is powerful at the time. And they're pretty fun. Like, they're fun to hate. I had a good time hating them. So,
are they political? Is it like a political aspect
mm,
of the plot, or
not
less of the?
really. It's more about being on the wrong side of like an apocalyptic event in many ways. So
Ah,
um, it's like the dark friends. Is that what they were called in Wheel of Time?
I don't know. I haven't read Wheel of
It,
Time, so
the thing about that is, like, every time I'm like, I don't understand why all these people are siding with the Dark Lord. Like, I've never understood. Like, that was a situation where those books are so damn long that I would have, and to be fair, I didn't finish them, so like maybe they do later. But like, they'd just be like, anyone could be a dark friend. I'm like, I feel like it would be the exception. Like, it would be
Hmm.
very few and far between of people being like, I'm gonna make the deal with Satan. Uh, but I can't comment on that as a complete negative, considering that I haven't finished it. So I'm sure someone can straighten me out on that, for sure, in the chat. Do you always prefer a nuanced antagonist?
Not necessarily, I don't think. I think there's something that Philip actually enlightened me about years ago is that there's room for flat characters in fiction. That
Hmm.
you can appreciate a flat character, that it doesn't always have to be three-dimensional, that it could actually serve the story sometimes. I guess it just depends. But I have been giving some thought to this idea of like what makes a villain compelling, especially when it comes to I don't I'm sure this could be a side conversation. I'm not sure I like the term grimdark anymore
I
because
don't
I
get
just feel
caught
like
up in the
sometimes
labels, honestly.
yeah, it could be helpful sometimes, I suppose, but
Sure.
sometimes I just feel like it's a little reductive. But I do wonder, and I'm sure there are multiple examples, and I need to do like an overview of this more in depth, like go through Abercrombie's villains, go through what Martin does, because Martin I think is like the best when it comes to this. But I feel like I was thinking about this actually after Tori from Tori Talks did a video about problematic content in fantasy, what she deems
Yeah.
problematic content when it comes to like uh, sexual abuse or topics like that that are portraying women just to like be the victim, but not really giving them any dimension or story, that kind of thing, or the fridging trope. And I think that there were a lot of fair points that she brought up in that video. It was a very good video. But something I wondered about after that is I started thinking about, well, in fantasy, we have the trope of the hero. Like that's a very common fantasy trope. You have the trope of the hero. And in order to have a hero, you usually have to have a villain or an antagonist. It
Mhm.
does seem to me like not always, but often when I think about examples, and I'm sure there are a lot of counter examples to this. When I think about a lot of like the more modern grim dark or darker, I'll just say darker fantasy that I've read, an easy way out to make a villain, an easy way to make a villain, make him a misogynist and make him a racist. Like those two things. And
Yeah,
maybe not
that'll
even
do
just
it.
fantasy,
That'll do
but
it.
yeah. Yeah. So I'm like, is there any way to make I mean, and don't get me wrong, like I will instantly hate a character who's a misogynist and a racist. Uh, but I also wonder if there are other ways, if that's just like too easy. You know what I
Yes.
mean? Like
Yes.
where if it could become lazy.
Yeah. So in wrestling, we call it cheap heat. If I come out, so in Canada, I did cheap heat all the time. So I was a villain in Canada when I would wrestle there. And I would come out singing the national anthem and talk about how Canada was America's hat and you're lucky that we haven't come up here and take it yet. Just being the most stereotypical, obnoxious American I could possibly be. I would talk about how it's called, it's not Canadian bacon, it's ham, you're idiots. Play the Pledge of Allegiance one more. I pledge allegiance. I was just really over the top. It's called cheap heat. Now, that's what the promoter wanted from me, by the way, because I would open up the show. We want to get the crowd hot, right? But the draw or the real, really good villains, and William Regal described this to me whenever we were sitting in the stands watching the show go on. We were doing our tryouts, and he would always talk with you before. And he was talking about how when he was a villain on television, that he never wanted to come out and be like, F you, flip you off, and smack your mother. Like that, anyone can do that. That's not a skill. However, what is a skill is when you go to the airport and you watch the guy at the ticket counter being just slightly entitled, and you're like, this guy's just a dick. Like you just want to smack him. Like it awakens something in you where you want to get active, right? Like you want to do something about it. And there's like little subtleties to what people can do, right? Smacking your lips when you eat, right? Which is why villains in movies, Lord of the Rings famously eating, popping the cherry tomatoes or whatever in his mouth, and you're just like, I just want to take that plate and smack you in the face with it. Like those are what get people coming back to read about those villains. And both are valid and have their place. That's kind of my point here. But I think like the over-the-top villains, the best ones, happen to be the ones that get under your skin and you have to think about it for a second. And maybe it's pulling on something that you haven't faced in your life or something about yourself. Who knows? But at one point, William Regal always said, I just despise people who wear sunglasses inside. I think it just makes them look like the biggest, see you next Tuesday. That's what he said to us. And then, all of a sudden you start seeing bad guys wearing sunglasses in their entrances, right? like you're not making the crowd mad. You're just making William Regal mad. It's not the best idea. So there's a difference between those two kinds of heat. You know what I mean? Philip said, did you have a mustache that you trolled when you were in Canada? No, I did not. I did
That would have
not.
been funny.
Yeah. So there's plenty of ways of doing villains. I think what happens sometimes to me, and maybe this is probably where like people start to feel one way about it or another and maybe have a bias against it, is when you read multiple books at the same time that are doing a lot of the same things with their villains or tropes we're talking about villains now, but this could be anything. And you read books time and time again, like 5 in a row, and they all have a sociopathic antagonist that wants to slap women and, you know what I mean? And just do terrible things and slavery and all this thing. And you're like, oh my God, like, can we please, can I get a villain that's a little more nuanced than this, right? Like that would be great. And the sad thing is probably at the top of my head, it's harder to think about the villains that are nuanced than it is the ones that aren't actually at the top of my head. I think The Dagger and the Coin has a really great antagonist that's really, really good for different reasons. I think in some ways you could say there's a little bit of cheap heat with Harold from The Stand, but he is definitely a fascinating character where you can kind of see into his psyche, and it's very disturbing. Um, but then we think about Disgrace by J.M. Coetzee and
Oh
how
yeah.
much that main character is detestable and hateable, but he is doing those things that we've mentioned. I mean, terrible.
Oh yeah, he is.
But it's done in a manner that I think is a little bit more compelling, possibly, than just, showing me on page a dude stepping on a puppy or something like that. So I don't know. Characters in general are just really hard, though, aren't they?
They are. No, I agree. I agree. Yeah. Thanks for answering that question because it's something I've been thinking about a lot lately. I think that's also a really good point though that you brought up that it can be just a matter of like picking up so many books where you see that trope replayed over and over again. But
Yeah, it can be
but
a
if
real
we
thing.
stretch ourselves, we could find, other examples, of course.
Oh, definitely. And, there's things that I go in and out of. Like I used to just always love Norse stuff and I thought it was so cool. I wanted to read more of it. And then I read too much of it and I said, I'm done. I'm not reading any more Viking shit. Like
Yeah.
I'm so through with it. Um, so actually speaking of like nuanced characterization and literature and all this stuff. So you hate Guy Gavriel Kay now. You came out and slammed him as a misogynist, and
I was waiting for this. Yes.
I thought that was fascinating. You're very lukewarm on the Sarantine Mosaic,
The
and
Sarantine Mosaic. Yeah.
yeah, the mid very nice. So you're getting the YouTube stuff down, and I love that. Um, I am very curious if you've thought any more about your opinion, and would you like to change it here tonight live?
I was wondering if you were going to pick this fight with me.
What do you
No,
mean
I mean,
wondering? You knew I had to. It's a ridiculous take, Johanna. No, I'm just kidding.
yeah.
Make your
No,
case.
yeah, and this is kind of a tricky thing because I think I wonder if one I have a hard time thinking I'm wrong, as like most people. But at the same time, like I mean, I do have to own the fact that my cat died when I was reading the books.
Yeah.
I did talk about this in our live discussion, our spoiler discussion, but my cat died right at the beginning of book one. And it was really strange the moment I was reading the book, like the exactly what was happening in the book the second I found out that my cat died,
Mm-hmm.
because it fit what was going on really well. But then the book changed in tone, and then I think that I just wasn't emotionally there. I wanted to be emotionally with where the book started because it does
Yeah.
have this change in atmosphere, this change in what's happening. But I mean, there's nothing wrong with the Sarantine Mosaic, and in fact, I have highly recommended it to a couple of people. I've highly, highly recommended it to John Morrow. I hope I'm getting the pronunciation of his name right. John Morrow is the reviewer of Grimdark magazine. He specifically loves he loves a lot of darker fantasy, obviously, but he's also a researcher or professor of glass. And some of the quotes that the main
Of
character
glass?
had of glass.
Glass.
Yes, glass. That was good timing with that zoom in.
With a
Yes. And so, yeah, so he studies glass or he knows all about glass. And while we don't go into the science of glass blowing in the mosaic, in the
I'm sorry.
Sarantine
I'm sorry.
mosaic,
Every time you say glass or glass blow, I'm just thinking meth. Every time. I'm from West Virginia. I just keep thinking about meth. Like I feel like you're out in this dude's whole operation. And he has an RV and he's just making crystal. Like that's where my brain is. Continue.
the,
I'm
Sar-
sorry.
the Sarantine mosaic, yeah.
That book would have been much better if GGK was on meth. I agree.
Oh my, yeah, absolutely. So yeah, I think he would love it because there are so many beautiful quotes in the books, specifically from this mosaicist, which is somebody who does mosaic work. I feel like I should have said that in my review, and I'm a dummy and didn't say that. But this particular character, he talks about the way that the light hits the glass and the importance of putting things in a specific order. And he just speaks so beautifully. Like some of the quotes about art in that duology are so beautiful. And I feel like what it's saying about art as a whole and like how we find meaning in our world, how we make sense of life that's so confusing when there are so many disparate parts that don't seem to make sense or go together or
Hmm.
there's so much conflict. I feel like the duology does an incredible job of conveying that message of what art means to people. So I did appreciate that, but yeah, I did have some complaints. As I said in that review, I did It just wasn't really crazy about like no build up to every single like get it on scene that happened numerous times. And I also just like I said, I enjoyed it, but some of this could have been affected by my cat's death. I'm not sure, but I didn't feel like it blew me away. Like it didn't emotionally hit me the way that other K books have.
Yeah, I was surprised when you said Tagana because I lack that emotional connection to Tagana. So me
Yeah.
and you are very opposite, I guess, in this regard. Now I know you're not like the biggest Tagana fan. Like you're not like this is the best of K, but
Yeah.
you did find at the end that emotional investment where I finished a book and was like, all right, it's over. Sick.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I had complaints about Tagana for sure.
Mhm.
But yeah, there were moments that inspired me that I thought were so beautiful.
Murphy says, I took a glass blowing class years ago, Johanna. I'm tracking with you. Ignore the dude, bro. I find that to be extremely rude. You're bullying
Right.
me.
Well, maybe you would enjoy Sarantine Mosaic. Although I know that Murphy did not get along with Lions of Alrasan, so I don't know. I mean, K does have a very specific style, and I feel like if you've read one K book, at least so far for me, I feel like I think I would know a K book if I picked up a K book at this point, if I didn't know he was the author. What do you think? Do you think
Yeah,
you
yeah, I agree for the most part. I think that's true. One of the things about Guy Gavriel K is he's not a mystery to me in the sense that he doesn't appeal to the masses like something like a Brandon Sanderson does. Like there are people who are like, why isn't he just the best selling author? I wish he was, but I do think he's extremely stylized. Like he has a way of going about things. It's very low magic. For Tagana has
Mhm.
more, but and also I know the Fennevar tapestry also has a lot of magic. But he's his very own special place in the genre. And he's just when I read him, I'm like, yeah, I could see people bouncing off of this. This is that quintessential slower paced fantasy. He's really making time with the characters to get to understand what's important to them. And I think one of the really big moments in the Sarantine Mosaic, and I'm not going to spoil anything, but is that kind of like that mystic scene in the
Mhm.
woods. And when I read it, it resonated with me. And I talked to someone at the same time, and they were like, that was the lamest thing I've ever read. Like, and I was like, you know what, though? I understand that. I get it. Because if it doesn't land, you might as well DNF the book,
Are
in
you
my
talking
opinion.
about the first book?
Hmm.
The mystic scene that happens towards the beginning of the first
Yes.
book?
Yes.
That was the moment I found out my cat died.
Oh.
Yeah. Can you
Oh.
imagine? Like, it was weird. It was eerie. Sorry, everybody who hasn't read it. It's not gonna make a lot of sense, but
Uh,
Jimmy gets it.
yeah. I
Yeah,
mean,
it's
I
tough.
maybe you should have just put it down at that point.
Yeah. And
um,
before that, like, right before that happened, I literally was like, "Oh my gosh, I'm loving this book, I'm loving this book."
yeah.
And yeah, it was hard.
Yeah. I'm terribly sorry you had to go through that. I really am. I dread the day whenever one of my cats goes. I will not be able to handle it. That'll be a very rough time for me. I don't know what I would do, especially if I'm reading a book. Every book after that's pretty doomed for a while. Samoki Do says every book is stylized. Damn it. Yeah, but it would be disingenuous to say that they're all equally stylized, and that there isn't styles that are more appealing to the masses or not. So while I get your point, I think it's kind of pedantic and it doesn't really apply to every book, right? Like if someone reads David Mitchell's Cloud Atlas and they're like, hey, this style doesn't work for me, it wouldn't be like, well, Twilight was styled too. It's like, well, yeah, but they're different styles. So there are people who lean into the style and lean into the craft more than others. And when we're talking about mass appeal, I think that, keeping it as plain as possible generally, not always, but generally leads to more people being able to read it and pick it up, especially with declining literacy levels. So
Yeah.
yes, every book is stylized, but that doesn't matter. If
Yeah.
everything is stylized, then there has to be different factors contributing to the style. They're going to be different.
Oh,
You
I
know.
100% agree with this. And oh, I wanted to add too, since you brought up David Mitchell, I just bought Cloud Atlas on Amazon Prime sale, so excited to get that soon.
Oh my, oh my goodness. I think you'll like it. I think you'll like it,
You look
but
nervous.
I am nervous. I mean, I don't know why anyone likes it. Like I don't know. Like I read it, and after I came out of the coma, like the whirlwind, and I came out of it, and I was like, I loved it. I immediately started thinking, I'm like, the fact that I like that's insane because like I can't recommend this to anybody. And BellTube read it, and he's actually recommended it a bunch of people, but even he says, he goes, not the most enjoyable time of my life. But like, wow, what an effort, and what a masterclass in storytelling and different formats and different styles of telling a story, and beautiful character voices and whatnot. So I think Cloud, and Matt on Book says Cloud Atlas with a heart. The people who like Cloud Atlas like it a ton. I don't know if any of us recommend it full-heartedly to anybody. So I hope if anyone was going to like it, I could see it being your thing, especially after your experience with Bone Clocks. And, you and I talked about Bone Clocks offline for a long time. And in our conversation with Laura from Fantasy Wash, beautiful conversation, wonderful time. I think we all came out of that conversation getting more out of the book. And that's the kind of author that David Mitchell is. He's writing something he wants you to kind of ruminate on, take and chew on it for a bit and come back. And I think his books also, from what I've read 3 of them now, are very, very readable. So
Yes, I'm gonna read Slate.
man,
I want to read Slate House next,
you should.
because
You should.
I think either you and John from Talking Story recommended I read that book next.
Yes, I think it was most likely John. By the way, John's the man. John and his wife both love David Mitchell, and that was when I knew that, they were my people. But I definitely recommend reading Slade House while Bone Clocks is still kind of fresh in your head, because I feel like if I had read Slade House just by itself, I would have liked it, but it wouldn't have liked it as much, to be honest, because it's short, and there's stuff there that's unique to it, but having the context of Bone Clocks really helps out a lot.
Okay, yeah, that's good. And I still have my notes from the Bone Clocks handy, so I'll refer to that.
Yeah,
That
and
was
Tanner says Cloud Atlas is incredible, and I jealously hoard my recommendation for it. Alex Archive said Cloud Atlas showed up in the New York Times top 100 books of 21st century and decided I'm finally gonna read it. Well, I hope so. And Andre, I did not watch the movie yet. I'm horrible about watching movies, but I will watch it at some point. I really will. I think Cloud Atlas is one of those books. The only way I can really describe it is like if you just love all types of different reading and all different types of stories, like it will push you. And I've said a couple of different times that the first 40 pages made me want to put my face in a blender. Like, will it blend my head? Like, I really wanted to stick my head into my ninja blender and kill my. I hated it. I hated it. And I was like in the channel, I'm like, guys, tell me it gets better than this, because I can't understand anything that's happening. How Bone Clocks is such like a ease into the story type thing, and he kind of like sprinkles in a little bit of the magic and stuff, and you have a good idea, and then he switches to POV, and you're like, oh, okay, we're doing this. This kind of Cloud Atlas is not that at all.
Oh no.
It is. He's just waterboarding you with the most dense prose of all time. And I said it was written pretentiously, and I had someone call me out and was like, that's just how people talked back then. And at first I felt really bad, and I said, oh, this is another example of me being an idiot on camera, and there's record of it. That sucks. But the more I thought about it, the more I was like, not everybody in the 1850s talked like this. Like, there was still classism, and there were still different cultures and regions and dialects. Like, you can't tell me the people living in Appalachia talk like this. Like, it was a proper gentleman speak, And I was just like, I should have pushed back on that comment. I should have responded. I shouldn't have been so nice in that comment, because I think I just said, oh, I'm an idiot. You're right. Whatever. But the more I thought about it, I was like, no, it was pretentious. I don't care what anyone says. But guess what? Worst opening to a book of my life, and now it is arguably in my top 3 favorite books ever. I'd have to think about it. Top 5 for sure. No doubt. No doubt.
Yeah. And like somebody said, it made the top 100 list for the New York Times. And you, me, and Murphy are going to be reading another book that made that list this month.
Ah, yes.
Which is Never Let Me Go.
Never Let Me Go. And we and you have not been on camera talking about Ishiguro at all, by the way. We
No.
never talked. We read Claire and the Sun together. That was my third Ishiguro book, and I loved it. I had a great time. I have not disliked a single book I've read from him yet. And I think it's just an absolute slammer, but that was your first one by him.
Yes. And actually, I doubt you'll remember this, but the last time I was on Chatting with Nuts last year, I did bring him up. I did bring him up because I remember I couldn't pronounce his name, and somebody had to bring it up in the chat. And I said, there's this author, and he wrote this book called Never Let Me Go. And I keep hearing so many amazing things about it. But yeah, I'm so excited to Betty read that one with you and Murphy as well. And I think the 3 of us are planning, depending on things how things go, the 3 of us are planning to have a discussion about that book and possibly both books, right? Or-
Yeah, I think so. And even if we don't, I'm fine with that. Like those are books I would just read, like and discuss, because those books we read them very slowly, 20 pages a day or so, and that's the way I like reading them. Now, what I will say is I think that he writes very readable books,
Yes.
and it makes me just want to sit down for a whole day and just read. But it's better, I think, when I stop a little bit, because there's so many little things. Just, I mean, at the sentence level, his writing is not complex as far as like, $5 words or anything. He's writing in a very straightforward manner that I think a lot of people be like, what's the big fuss about this? But then you start looking at the subcontext and you're like, oh my God, he has built this entire world that you can imagine without saying anything about it. And I think that that's like actually, I think it's something that like fantasy authors could learn from in many
Yeah.
ways, being economical, with their word choice, the diction, everything. Evie wanted to know if I'm going to talk Remains of the Day with Alan. I would literally talk about it with Alan tomorrow. I would love to. The fact that Alan loved that book makes me so happy, because I think that, and that's still my favorite from him, by the way. Out of everything I've read, that's still my favorite. I will be shocked if any of his books reach Remains of the Day level. It be hard to beat.
I am so excited, especially because people also, I think maybe you included, have given it the stoner buzzword along with that. So is that a dude bro type of book?
No. It
No?
is actually very in argument with Stoner in many ways. As we know, John
Hmm.
Williams was kind of talking about how I actually took Stoner as a warning. I took Stoner as a warning. This is actually a good
I guess it can
example.
be taken that way. It
Yeah,
can be taken that way.
this is a good example though, where we find out what the author really intended, and I'm like, oh, I got the opposite out of it. So like, what does
Yeah.
that mean for the book? I'm not sure. I don't really care either, to be honest, because I know what I got out of it. But I took it as a warning. Like, don't be obsessed with your job, and don't be timid. Stand up for yourself. Do things the way that you want to do. Don't just, conform to the normalities of I have to do this and then next I do this. And, I thought it was someone who was living a passive life that should have stood up for themselves a little bit more. But John
And I
Williams
felt,
talks,
yeah.
yeah, John Williams talks about it being a job, about it, that there is pride and value in taking pride in your job, like having a
Yes.
job be your thing and your passion, and just being good at a job is good enough. Whereas I didn't get that out of that book at all.
So I love that book. Oh gosh, is it okay for me to gush about Stoner again?
Go for it.
But yeah, I mean, I love that book because I feel like you could look at it either way. And yes, John Williams does say in the forward of Stoner that he sees Stoner as a hero because he did live the life that he wanted to live, that he lived according to his values. At the same time, there are points to be made that he didn't do so well either in other areas. It's a mixed bag, and I don't know that everybody's life is so easily reduced one way or another. And that's
Well,
part of what I love about that.
I think the reason why I feel so strongly about the book in many ways is because, like, whenever I was in wrestling, like, that was my dream. That was what I was chasing. That's what I was doing. And everyone will tell you that was around me at that time, if they really knew me, that I was not the greatest person. And I was not, I was one way, and I took a lot of pride in it. And to me, it wasn't about the necessarily the job, but it was the title of it and the way of life. And I was not good at anything else, and I was very miserable to be around. I was super selfish, and I would not say I was a good person, to be honest with you. And I now live a life that's very opposite of that, and I don't have that tunnel vision on anything really. I get obsessive, but we're talking about like complete devotion. That's gone. And I got to tell you, between the two of a balanced life and what I did some amazing things. And I think you have to be somewhat delusional and narcissistic to make it in a business like that, but make it in a lot of fields that are competitive. I think I prefer what I have now, but there is a void there. I mean, this is I'm not going to go into a therapy session for myself, because there's a lot I could pick apart about this, and happiness and fulfillment and all this shit. But
Yeah.
to me, it's like I've seen both sides of the coin, and I think Remains of the Day
Mm.
is taking the opposite stance and saying, do not get caught up, because the world will move on. And maybe your title or your job is basically being an English butler in a World War II era, moving past World War II, and you serve someone who might have been on the wrong side of history.
Yes.
What do you do then? The fine English butler went away. It kind of dissipated. I'm sure there's like at least two out there still, but like it was no longer viable. And this man is looking down every regret he ever had in his life because he was so devoted to his craft. And to me, it's more poignant than Stoner in that regard when talking about that exact topic.
I know I'm gonna love it. There's just no doubt in me. I will love that book.
Yeah, you better, or you ain't coming on ever again.
There's no way. There's no way I'm not gonna love that. I already know I will. Especially the conflict. That conflict setup already has me just wanting to pick up the book right now, but I won't because I'm going to
I
wait.
I would actually recommend maybe between Never Let Me Go and this, because those are his two bangers. Like that's what people say. Though I'm going to read everything he's ever written. Pale View of
Me
Hills,
too.
which Andre liked more. Pale View of Hills is just very psychological, and it ties into a lot of the repression of like emotion and stuff from World War II Japanese history in Japan, written from Ishiguro, and about a mother and a daughter. And it is very intense and slippery, as I just once described Gene Wolfe's writing as slippery. I think it's a very slippery novel. Things just get through that you don't realize, and then by the end of the story, you realize that you read a different story than was intended, and you're like, "Holy crap, what a book!" But it has almost no plot, by the way.
Oh, I'm totally fine with that. I
Yeah.
apparently love plotless books, so yeah.
Oh, K Fox
I don't
proving
know.
me wrong. There's a butling school in New York that trains people how to be a butler. It's coming back.
All right. Okay.
Sign me up.
Yes. Yeah, I have no doubt. I will love that. And that's something I also love about Ishiguro. You and I have talked about that before. While Never Let Me Go is by far his most celebrated book, everybody I talk to seems to have a different favorite of his. I have a friend here in town, and his favorite is The Unconsoled, and his girlfriend's favorite is not The Buried Giant. Maybe it was The Buried Giant, and maybe it was A Pale View of Hills. I don't know. But I feel like so many people have different favorites when it comes to this author, and I think that says something about his range, especially the fact that he doesn't do one type of story, but he obviously does something right for people who love his books.
Yeah, definitely. And it's funny because, we do love fantasy and sci-fi, and then we read, something like this, more literary fiction or whatever. But so much of what I love about Claire and the Sun was the unspoken world building, kind of what I was referring to before. But we sat and talked about the possibilities of this world that he has developed. And like, I'd love to see another story in that world.
Oh,
Like,
me too. I mean, and it blew my mind because I know this is going to be a little different than what I know you love, but I don't necessarily gravitate towards post-apocalyptic or dystopian
right.
titles or descriptions. Not to say I haven't enjoyed those, because actually, if I think about it, I've enjoyed a lot of books that have happened to be dystopian, but it's
Mhm.
just not something I usually gravitate towards if I find out that a book is described that way. But that book, it doesn't have the most detailed described world building. He sort of drops you in and sort of drip feeds you information, but it works so well for me and for you and for Murphy. I mean, we were just like in a constant state of wonder about what he was doing and what he was creating. It was just absolutely incredible, that
Well, it's also
experience.
interesting because, like, obviously we're three separate people with different experiences and backgrounds and beliefs and whatever else. And the context clues he would give us would lead each of us to a different conclusion about what the world was like based on our
Yeah,
preconceived consumptions of what the world would do in that kind of situation. That's crazy.
that's a good point, and we never talked about that because nobody would know that because they didn't like, know of our buddy read, but we were doing that, right? Like, you would say,
Yeah.
"Oh, I think this is happening," and then Murphy said, "I thought this was happening." I said, "Well, I think this is happening," and the 3 of us would go back and forth and decide if we agree or not, and then that was really fun about that buddy read. That's such a
We
good point.
almost never came back with a little bit of that context being to the same conclusion of what happened in the world. We might have the same
That's so
pieces, but
true.
like, and then we'd all kind of come together, and then I don't know. Like, I feel like we could write fanfic in the Claire and the Sun world, and it would be it'd probably be crap compared to what he's done, but well,
It would
I'd
be on
like
my
it.
heart.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I would have fun doing it. That's for certain. Um, yeah, I'm super excited to read Never Let Me Go.
Yeah.
Just think we're starting that next Friday. I
I
think.
think so. Yeah, I've
I'm
never
pretty
been
sure.
so excited about an author, like, even before I read Claire and the Sun. I don't know that I can't think of another author, maybe Guy Gabriel Kay, that I've been more certain that I would enjoy, like, more certain
Mhm.
about. And of course, there is room for error since I've only read 1 book, but yeah, I've just not discovered an author I've been that excited about in a long time.
Yeah, I think Vera is jumping in. Just so you know, Vera said, join back in to support Johanna again. And before she jumped in, she said, I agree with everything Johanna is saying, no matter what it is. Where's the support for me? Okay. Johanna is the best. I mean, Johanna is, I don't know. I just feel hated on by a lot
I
of
love
people.
Vera. She is so awesome. Oh my god.
And then she's going to read Ishiguro. I guess I will just, I will just leave the stream and we'll let you run this whole thing, Johanna. Why not?
No, whatever.
I'll
You just
invite
got
Vera
to
and you guys can talk. I'll just leave. It's fine. I'll just take this off and we'll just leave. I'll just get out of here. Okay.
No.
I am taking this off because it's so hot in my office right now. It's so hot in here.
Oh wow.
7 hells. It's hot.
Is it getting cooler where you live at all at this time of year? Or?
It's not that bad. You know what is bad though? You know what is bad?
What?
This drove me bananas. So there was a bunch of A Song of Ice and Fire people that were showing off the fact that there was this auction going on. They're auctioning off the original properties of all of the set of Game of Thrones. Thousands of pieces. You know that I would want that, right?
Yes.
Vera, you can come on Chatting with Nuts. We can talk, and then you have to show me some support first, just so you know.
Could be the girly pop episode.
I'm hot girl fiction guy. Like, come on, right. I'm the one. I'm the one. Anyways, so they're doing this auction, Johanna, right? They're doing this auction. I looked at this auction. Guess how much the Hound's armor set went for? Just guess.
Oh no. $5,000.
$200,000.
What?
Yes. They were selling the Iron Throne. Kelsey, my lovely wife, was like, I know how much it would mean for him for his birthday. So she tried to get me in season 1. Robert Baratheon pulls out a tournament scroll and they like read off like, who's up next, whatever. And the Hound goes, she bet on that scroll thinking, it might be at most a couple $100 at the very most, but like, his birthday gift, we'll try it, It went for $4,000. Who has this money? Who are these people, Johanna? I don't know. I don't get it. I'm so upset.
People who own mansions that are like the Song of Ice and Fire mansion, kind of like the Brandon Sanderson mansion. Can you imagine? That kind of money to buy Game of Thrones. Wow.
It literally broke my heart. And then like Kelsey was still on there like, can you believe this is going for this? I'm like, I literally don't want to hear about it because it's like depressing me. Like first off, it's getting me sad that they're like selling, like the show's dead. Like I know it's over, but like they're selling it off. And I'm just like, oh my God, okay, that's already melancholy. And then you just tell me, oh, and by the way, some dude that watched only season 8 is putting all the shit in his basement because he's a millionaire. And I'm like, I just want to die. I don't want to live in this world no more.
You said like the Iron Throne, that went for sale?
Quite literally, we're selling the Iron Throne. I think the starting bid was $40,000. So it probably went for like $1 million. I mean,
don't they use that for House of the Dragon, or is that different?
No, they use different every season they like refresh things. Not every time, but a lot of stuff gets refreshed. But you could have bought Cersei's doublet. It was only like $15,000. Yeah, we could have pulled in a GoFundMe, see if Alan has any left over from getting hit by a truck. We could. Vera says, Jimmy, you are so girly pop. Love ya. We can talk about My Dark Vanessa. Hey, if you want to come on and talk about My Dark Vanessa, I would be glad. I feel like that's a book I haven't talked about enough, but it's hard to talk about without spoilers,
Incredible book. Definitely one of the darkest books I've read. I love Vera's taste, by the way. I just watched her on BellTube stream, and she mentioned so many books, and I'm like, yes, Letters to a Young Poet, yes, Abercrombie, yes. So yeah, she has good taste.
I had found Vera on the recommended page, and then literally I think that week you had her on Why Read, and it's just, and now she's trying to get on Dr. Fantasy. Dr. Fantasy, I mean, at this point, I don't know. Maybe she doesn't.
I got her first, though. I got her first on Why Read. That was her first live stream. So hooray for me.
Jimmy, do you have Instagram? I do have an Instagram. It's Jimmy Nuts, and I've never posted, and I have like 900 followers. It makes no sense. But I am on there, so if you want to message me, you can. I just don't really use it ever. But feel free to reach out to me.
I didn't tag you because I posted this episode, but I didn't tag you because I wasn't sure because I know
Oh,
that you're not active as a user on there. I should
I
have
be
asked.
lurking. I be seeing it. I saw it.
Okay. I
I
know,
saw
I
it.
know. I just didn't know if you wanted to be tagged as like somebody who doesn't want to
No, I
draw. You
actually
seem
block.
like you don't want to draw attention to yourself on
That
there.
is very correct. This is the only social media platform I actively use. I literally don't use Twitter at all anymore, like at
I
all.
stopped. I
Um,
stopped too. Yeah.
I obviously have my my patron Discord that I go into, and I spend my time on the internet in there, and then on YouTube. That's really kind of it for me. Um, do you feel like you've leveled up recently? Because I feel like you've leveled up recently. Like watching I always watch people's videos, but I also always go back and watch them before I have them on, just in case there's like a little, nugget somewhere in there that I want to pull out and talk about. For today, it was like the gendered reading thing, but your videos have just gotten so much better. Like they look better, they sound better, but also like you're talking about books. What I like to do, which is putting them all together and then finding a way of making it all work and being concise. And I think you just do an absolute wonderful job of it, and I mean that.
Oh, thank you so much. Well, that is my goal. That is my goal that even though I feel like I could do so much better at my thumbnail game and my title game, which a lot of YouTube is about having very good, I mean, that's important. It's important to have a good thumbnail and it's important to have a good title to your video, I think. But because I'm not the best when it comes to those things, or I haven't figured those things out so much, I really want people to feel like they get value out of my videos when they click on them. I want them
Mhm.
to have some insights about the books I read, or to have something that's useful to hear about when it comes to the books that I'm talking about. So that is very important to me. I do put a lot of effort into that, and I really appreciate that coming from you because I think that you are just like seriously the best. I mean, your wrap up last time. I mean, I know. You're not very modest, but like you are very good at talking about books, and it just cannot be denied. So that compliment means a lot to me. So thank you
Well,
very, very much.
I genuinely like the way you talk about books so very much. And because I always find that I'm getting something of worth when I'm watching your videos. And also, I think you're kind of like me, where you're very cautious not to use an objective tone about very much at all, which I respect because it makes me feel a little bit less insane. The arguments that I end up having with myself, like in front of people live, which is crazy. But what is like still driving you to want to talk about these books and to continue to review it? Because I think you and I both look at it as a skill, and
Mhm.
we're maybe worried about how not how we say things, but literally what we are saying, the literal like meat and potatoes of the book content. So like, I don't know, have you found a groove? Do you feel yourself getting better at it? Do you feel stagnated? Like, where are you at with that?
I do feel like I'm getting better, and I, I, it's a skill that I value. I enjoy all types of content on YouTube, and I enjoy people who are purely entertaining. But whatever. But I also really appreciate it when somebody can convey the meaning of a book or the themes of a book or talk about the tone of a book. And so I try to hone in on the things that I enjoy listening about when it comes to books. And I think you're very similar. Like you have ideas in your mind about things you'd want to hear as somebody who hasn't picked up a book or what makes
Yeah.
it interesting. And so it's important to me. I I'm honestly kind of nerdy about it. I truly enjoy that part of booktube. I truly enjoy the reviewer side of booktube. And yeah, and I do believe it's a skill.
Now, do you write reviews out still?
I do, but I don't post them. So what I do,
Hmm.
this is my process. I did a video on this earlier this year on my journaling process. So what I do is every single day, and I try to make it every single day unless I'm traveling. That's the only exception. I will write a one-page entry in my journal about the book I'm reading, and I draw a margin, and I do what's called marginalia. So I write just my thoughts. Like I don't overthink it, I don't overanalyze it. If I tab something in a book, I might refer to that tab, but I just write out my thoughts that day on the section I read. And then in the margin, I'll write themes or keywords that I see come out in my thoughts. Then when I
Mm,
finish the book, I usually don't go back and read everything that I've read in my journal entry, but I look at the key themes in the margins and I try to see if there's a pattern or if I see things that stuck out to me. And then what I do is I go to this other journal and I will write out a 1 to 2 page review. Like, here's my dispossessed one. Um, and usually it's in pen. I don't edit. I try not to overthink it again. I just write. And that's
mm,
hard. It's really hard in a way because I still spend a lot of time thinking about it even while I'm doing it. But I do it in pen and I do it in my journal because I want not to overthink it. If I did it on the computer, I would be over editing. I would be in my head way too much and it would take way too long. So I
yeah.
need to make this a sustainable practice for me. So that's how I go about it. And then that somehow just sets me up pretty well for talking about the book in a video. That's my process. And what is
That's
Alan saying?
that's pretty no that's pretty thorough, and I really like that. I just take down some bullet point notes, and I usually can at the end of a book kind of sum up in like a 5 minute spiel to Kelsey in the car or somewhere if I'm in the shower and she's just hanging out. That's where I work out my thoughts. Actually, that's my thing. Mine's almost all pure speaking, no matter what it is, and maybe that's a way that I kind of refine because like when I did my wrap up live, I'm just like doing basically book reviews, like
Yes,
one
you
after
are.
the other. So it's like I've chewed on it for a while. I haven't written most of the stuff down, but I've been thinking about it for a while. And it's almost to the point where I feel like I'm like gonna bust. Like I'm like, I gotta talk about this. And if a book doesn't give me that feeling, that's not a good sign. That's generally not a good sign. Sometimes there are books that I don't talk about a ton and I do love them, but most of the time if a book is not getting me to like, oh, then it was probably doomed with apathy, which is probably the worst thing that a book can leave me with afterwards.
Well, that is the worst.
Yeah, it is. Library of Alexandria says, the way you guys are talking legit makes me not want to upload videos because it does not feel nearly as cerebral as everyone seems to like. So my counterpoint to this one, Alan, variety is so important. And you say that, but then you do talk impassionately about certain themes. Like this has nothing to do with the videos or the books or us. I mean, this is just your self-loathing. This is all that is. Like, you're brilliant. You're a brilliant guy, and no one doubts that. And if they do, they're dumb. But also, I would say that everyone seems to like part is the fallacy here. Me and Johanna are not overflowing with views. Me and Johanna
No.
are not raking in the 10,000 view videos. This is not what maybe everyone in this chat likes to see, maybe 99% of them. But I don't think the flavor of booktube that we, I guess, tend to want to, hone is not what that's not going to get the mass audiences. But the truth is I don't want a massive audience. I like where I am. And the same to you, Evie. Evie, you talk about books in wonderful ways. I don't know anyone almost nearly as passionate about you as the things you're passionate about. And passion, in my opinion, is the number one thing.
Yeah. And I just want to be clear that process I talked about, I make it so short. Like my journal entries are literally 5 minutes or less. And my reviews, like I said, I just do it all in one go. They're bad. They're like shitty reviews. I'm never going to show them to anybody, but they just are a way to like help process my thoughts so that I'm ready to talk about things on the video.
Mm-hmm.
But I understand that that's not. I'm a nerd and I've journaled my whole life. That's something Jimmy knows about me.
Mm-hmm.
I've journaled my whole life. I love journaling. So for me, it's just kind of like an extension of something I already love to do. And Alan, you are so good at reviews. Like, come on, your Augustus review.
Besides the dispossessed.
Besides the dispossessed, yes. Besides that one, the Augustus one was so good. The way he was talking about how you can't legislate virtue. Like, how is that not a theme? And, and, and the other thing about Alan, so Alan is the reason, I talked about this in the first time I was on Chatting with Nuts. Alan is the reason I started my channel. Like, was my number one inspiration to get on camera, to get in the community. And when I started making videos, my first thought was I watched one of my videos and I was like, oh my gosh. Then I watched Alan's video and I'm like, I have no personality. Like, I
Yeah.
have to make up for the fact I have no personality compared to Alan.
Yeah, there is an entertainment side of these things.
There is, and that's important. I mean, if you're going to
It
be on
is
camera
important.
talking about things, it's important.
Yeah, and there's also nothing wrong with it. I like leaning into the entertainment side of things. Why sometimes I do bits and gags, and I remember the first time I did the Bobby B thing in a video, and I had someone comment like, "Good stuff, cut that crap out." And I was like, that just makes me want to do it more. Now that I know I'm under your skin, I want to continue to do it. But yeah, entertainment is a big aspect of it. And entertainment doesn't mean forcing, bits like I do or anything, but like it can even just be in the way that you talk and being like passion, in my opinion, is entertaining. I was talking to Jared today, and he was talking about something I don't care about. I can't remember what it was. But the way he talked about it, I was like, dude, this is like compelling to listen to. Like, I don't know anything about what you're talking about, but like, I want to know more, and I want to see you do something,
Yeah. Well, and Alan does do great bits in his editing too. Like he was doing
Alan's very high effort. Like, to me, that's high
yeah.
effort, I guess I should say. Like, to me, I just did cuts and threw in a Bobby B skit, and that was a wrap. Alan is like dedicated to the bit, and there's nothing more as someone who like loves late night and Conan, and I love someone who's committed to the bit. It's like my favorite thing.
Me too. I love his bits. What is the arch thing from The Witcher that he uses? Arch, blah blah blah. I can't remember what it was now.
I can't remember except when I see it in Alan videos, and it's something I never even saw like or thought of whenever I was playing Witcher. Alan said, "Sorry, I was not trying to make it about me for once. I just always hear you guys talk about this cerebral stuff, and I just feel so outside on that one." Well, I mean, everyone's different. I mean, there's plenty of people who probably think a windbag, I don't have any background in educate. Like, I have no education. I've taken too many chair shots to the face. Like, I don't understand why anyone listens to me. But they do. And I guess people have some sort of need to listen. Maybe they're just laughing the entire time, which is fine. I'm okay with that. And Alan also says, dispossesses for tie-dye wearing hippies.
I should have worn tie-dye. Oh, well.
What an absolute shame. I did want to highlight this. Jason Brogan said, just finished House of Chains and loved it, but always feel like a great accomplishment finishing a Malazan book. Yeah, I always felt a sense of accomplishment as well. And I know a lot of people, and I don't think this is uncommon, but they feel like, okay, now I need a break. For me, it was always like, I did it and I can do it again. And I would just like, and I would want to get into the next book. And I just like ripped through that series because of that. And I think it's mainly because I found they follow the similar format, right? Like certain amount of parts, you're going to have these little short stories that all kind of come, I shouldn't call it short story, but little parts that all come together inside their own tale. And I always just was mesmerized by how it would come together. I loved it. The finales of those books always carried me into the next ones, even whenever the beginnings of it were slow. And I remember thinking the Karsa stuff was probably the first time I had any kind of struggle. And I think I remember messaging Alan and being like, after like the first 2 chapters, I was like, okay, I'm struggling. Like, what am I set up for here? And Alan's like, nah, you'll be fine, dude. Just like keep reading, enjoy Karsa for what it is. Like, you're going to love it. And I did.
He was right.
Yes,
yeah.
he was.
Absolutely.
Yep.
Oh, you read that series fast.
Yeah, I read them all in like 8 or 9 months.
Arch grateful. That's what it was. I'm grateful.
Bookish is here. Bookish, we talked about you very early on in the episode. We were talking about gendered reading, and I recommended your channel actually for that. And I think we praised you in general as well. And then I cursed your name for disliking Game of Thrones and spit on my screen. I didn't do any of that, but I was very reasonable, I think, in my sadness. But we use you as a great example as someone who reads diversely and widely, and someone we actually get recommendations from. Where are you getting your recommendations from nowadays? Because, once you're doing booktube and stuff, I don't know about you, but sometimes I have to be careful about watching a lot of booktube because it tears my joy away from doing it. Like if I see, like, honestly, like I'll watch someone like a talking story and I think that he's the best. And I'm like, so why do I exist? Like, why do I need to do this? Like, he's got it. He's handled it. We're very similar in our approaches and our attitudes. And I'm like, maybe I don't, maybe I've done my time. I've given enough. Maybe it's over.
That's not true.
I know
that's
that.
not true. And he would be upset to hear that. But I mean, he would be flattered, but not upset. Yeah.
But I guess what I'm saying is, like, do you just still watch a ton of booktube? Is that where you're getting recommendations from? Like, where do you find your books?
Yeah, I think mostly booktube, honestly. Yeah, I actually thought about doing a video about this, trying to decide like what booktuber influences my TBR the most. And it's between you and Alan. I think you're ahead, actually.
I hope so.
But you actually have gone out of your way to specifically recommend me books. and you do so very carefully, like with a Song for a Bone, for example. And then of course we buddy read a whole bunch of books together. But as far as like, I know with Ishiguro, I saw him, I think on like a top list or something. And then I looked up some videos on him, and they were in different parts of BookTube, these
Hmm.
videos. So it wasn't by people I knew, but I just got such a strong sense of what kind of writer he was that I felt like this is down my alley. I just know it. I just have a feeling. As far as other books that I have been influenced to read, gosh, I don't know. I don't know. That's a hard one right now. Like Claire Keegan was a huge discovery for me this year, but I
Mm.
discovered that actually because of an Audible sale. And then Bookish did inspire me to pick up Foster, who's by the same author. But I picked up Small Things Like These because I found it on an Audible sale like several years ago. I picked it up. I thought this looks interesting. I have no idea what this is about. Was blown away. Highly recommend if you read that book, by the way, read it at Christmas time.
Oh,
Yes, it's a Christmas time read. Yeah.
interesting.
I told Murphy the same, so maybe you two can read it around the same time.
Maybe we will. Maybe we'll convene and talk mad shit behind your back. It'll be sick, actually.
It's one of those authors though where I could see it being very much like what you were saying about Ishiguro, where somebody could read it and the prose has a simplicity to it in some sense that some people might look at it and be like, oh, what's the big deal? Like it's very easy to do that, but then you realize there's a lot under the surface if you take time to engage with it. So it's one of those type of authors. So I think there's a good chance you might really enjoy it.
I feel as if I would have hated all those books that I love so much. Mitchell, if 4 years ago, I would have absolutely hated them.
Oh, I wanted to ask you about that too. I wanted to
Oh
ask you about
yeah.
that because when you started your channel, you were a Song of Ice and Fire guy. You
Hmm.
were big about I'm the Fantasy Network. And then somewhere along the lines, you started reading John Williams and David Mitchell and experimenting with what, Demon Copperfield? Is that the
Demon
book?
Copperhead
Copperhead.
by
Oops.
Barbara Kingsolver. Grandma fiction, the way I like
Yeah.
it. Yeah, a lot of that stuff came from patrons, actually. A lot of it was the Patreon pick of the month.
Ah.
Yeah. Like Stoner, when it won, I was like, shit. Like I thought it was gonna be about stone. I thought it was about weed. I did, and then I read what it was about, and I said, oh my god, it's so much worse. It's so boring, And then I read it, and I was sucked in. Like on the first chapter, I was like, what is happening? What is this book? And I just said, this book has no right to be as good as it is for what it's about. And then that opened up my mind a little bit, and I said, maybe the back of the book blurb isn't as important, or the catchy hook. Maybe reading the first chapter is a good idea. And I'm a habitual free sampler. Like I'll do the sample on Amazon, get it sent to my Kindle or my browser. And I'm telling you, I keep saying this in my Discord, folks, you got to do it. One, it's going to save you a lot of money if you're just buying books, if you're not getting them from the library all the time. And also, it's going to save you on your holds. You don't need to put a book on hold if you read the sample and you think it's dog water. Like, there's no reason to get to it, right? And a lot of the books I like lately have been not very popular books that I don't think a lot of people are going to love. So I always tell people, go try the samples. You got to try the samples. And the more for me that I kind of was able to give some leeway to the writing, like find out what the writing was, and not worry so much about the premise. Like if I hear enough discussion around something, I'm like, all right, let's try this out, right? And it has been working out really well for me. I have found some stuff that I really adore that I would have never read years ago.
So awesome. I love that. I love that. So Stoner was the gateway. Yeah. It might have been my gateway too.
Yeah, I think Stoner, I think 11/22/63. I know that sounds really weird, but that was also definitely one part of it. And I was just like, yeah, like I need to read a little bit more like borderline outside of that fantasy realm. But for me, I'm also one of those people. I like to, when I dive into something, I want to dive in. Like I want to get everything from it, and I want to learn all the intricacies. And for me, like I look at reading as a whole. And of course, fantasy's been super important to me, and it's my mainstay still. And for me, that's going back and reading a little bit older stuff too. Like, well, let's go. Fantasy did exist before 1990. Let's go back and read more of that. So that's kind of the obsession in some ways right now with that. But also just finding stuff that's like on that borderline where they don't know where to put it in the bookstore. I love that stuff, which is, I think Mitchell falls into that.
Yes. That's definitely my thing right now. I love things that push the genre.
Murphy said she's not buddy reading with me. She's going to read it with Alan, and then she spelled Alan's name wrong, which is like the cherry on. Absolutely. Just
That's how you spelled it last night, and I started doing it too.
Yes, we should all spell his name with an A. I think that's very important.
Alan.
Andre said, now he's James's Book Nook. You know, I thought about changing the name, but I was like, who cares? Who cares?
Yeah.
I absolutely love fantasy still. Like, and whenever, and I started having that moment where I was like, am I reading enough fantasy? And then I did the math. I'm like, I'm reading plenty of fantasy. It's fine. Like, I know what I like. It'll be okay. Yeah. K Fox wants to know if I read Flight Behavior by Barbara Kingsolver. I haven't, but I own it. But I haven't read it yet. Yeah. And Brent said, Demon Copperhead is a book I picked up knowing almost nothing about, but it was amazing. That makes me so happy. I bought it out of frustration. Oh, I sampled it out of frustration. I saw it everywhere in the bookstores. I was so sick of seeing it because it won the Booker or whatever, or Pulitzer. I was like, gee, this book probably sucks. And then I read the sample. I was like, that wasn't that good. And then I thought about it, and I was like, I read it again. I was like, God, that was really good, wasn't that? And then I bought it, and then I read it, and I was like, God, this book is so good.
Wow. I know that you were talking about that book quite a bit. I might need to check it out at some point. It is a good break though, because I do love fantasy too, but sometimes you just need a break between worlds. And so I feel like having a nice standalone in a different genre or something that's pushing the genre, I don't know, it's just very refreshing at times, I think.
Yeah, I definitely agree. And there's just times wherever I want to get into fantasy deeper, and then that's whenever I will go into it, right? Like, for instance, I'm reading Tad Williams right now, and I'm reading Last King of Osnar. There's a bunch of people I know reading it. We're all having a blast with it, and it is so good and so rich, and it's slow paced, but my God, does he go into details, and we're learning about things. There's stuff coming back from the original trilogy that I thought was nothing, and like just really great stuff. Honestly, I don't need any other fantasy writing. I don't need to convolute the brain waves. I got a lot of world building in my head, so I've been enjoying reading some other things outside.
Yeah.
Now, you could still read within fantasy and read something opposite. Like Dungeon Crawler Carl is the opposite of Tad Williams in so many ways. I mean, it's like pure adrenaline pumping, you know, slam a coffee, run into a brick wall type shit. So like totally different. But I can do that at the same time. A little bit of a different thing. But like there's so many epic fantasy series I want to read right now. Like I really want to try Rune Lords by David Farland. I think it's Farland. I'm supposed to start that next month, actually. But there was no way I could start that while I was reading Tad Williams. Like I just want to enjoy Tad. Like I want to be immersed. Like I just want to take my time and be immersed in it. And there's no one that does that better for me than Tad Williams, other than George, I would say.
Oh, I need to get to Tad Williams. Yeah.
I do think you will enjoy it. I think you'll get something out of it.
I'm certain I will. Love that Tad cover.
Yeah. I think he's mocking the new covers that are not from Michael Whalen, which makes me want to cry.
Oh, really? Oh, no.
Yeah, they're not great. Ryan says, Jimmy's taste and mine are total opposites. If Jimmy likes it, chances are it'll miss with me. And you're still here, and I respect that because the more and more I think about how I think people seek out people to validate their experiences or opinions. I love when I see people who do not agree with me around and to have discussions with them, whatever. You know, I'm very about this validation thing right now. I had a long talk with Murphy about it, but it's something that's been on my brain for a very long time. And Murphy is in the chat still trolling. She said, I don't know, Johanna recommended it to me, but then she told Jimmy to read it. And me and my compassion was to be contrarian. So. Wow, so many typos. I mean, I wasn't going to say it, but yeah.
I always give typos in the chat. Not a big deal. What is she referring to? What that I recommended you the same book? Or
I think maybe the book that we were talking about possibly reading together. I'm thinking. The
Clark Keegan?
Yes. That you recommended that we read at Christmas time. I do own it, and I want to read some Claire Keegan. So
I hope you like it. I hope not.
I'll have Kelsey read it, and she can read it with Murphy.
There you go. It's super short. Her books are very, very, very short. Like you could read it in an afternoon.
Brent says, oh, Jimmy, you mean you don't like the covers of Into the Owl Man and the Navigator's Romanticy Mask? Yeah, the covers that do not match since 1988, we've been having the same cover art, and then they decided to change it in the last two. Makes me so upset. Makes me so upset. Alan, we are reading together, but you don't read. You don't read. Go read some
We were
James Clavell.
we were talking about playing Baldur's Gate 3 together, Alan.
He was very upset about that.
Oh, he already got upset.
Yeah, he was recanting his betrayal last night on Talking Story. So you're still getting recommends from BookTube. I think that's really great. You know what I do a lot of times? I like going back and looking at like top 10 lists before popular stuff came out. It's like before A Song of Ice and Fire, and that's where like Many Colored Land gets mentioned quite a bit. I shouldn't say before Song of Ice and Fire because Many Colored Land was published like I think a couple years after, but like you know what I'm talking about, like before the Stormlight Archive and Mistborn and First Law and all these things. Like I like going back and looking at like what were people putting in their top 10s back. We get all the top 10s now. We know them. You could list them all, right?
Yeah.
Jade City, blah. You know it's we could ad nauseum know which ones that we're talking about, but I think that it's really interesting to go back and see what was like all the jazz back then that didn't hold up. Or I shouldn't say hold up, but didn't make it through. It didn't stay in. Where's Mercy of Gods, Jimmy? I didn't get an invite. I didn't get an invite for this, unfortunately.
Yeah, I know. Alan was ranting at me the other day. He was like, "You're probably going to be buddy reading something with Jimmy or Murphy or Philip or Jared," which I've never buddy read a book with Jared before.
Jared doesn't buddy read. He's written Aristotle. Ain't nobody want to buddy read with Jared.
Oh, well, funny. But yeah, he said, "How about reading some KJ Parker, Johanna? How about that?"
You should read Folding Knife. That is one of the best character books ever.
But I can't do it if you say so. It has to be because Alan says so.
Yes, because you can never read The Folding Knife. I thought Company was just okay. You could read that and love it, and he would be like, "See, Jimmy's wrong." So you have a chance. I think The Folding Knife by KJ Parker is like home run, like 6 out of 5 stars. It's that good. Yeah. It's so good. One of the more underrated books I think I've read. But do you have a series on your horizon that you're like fantasy series? Because obviously you're going through Worlds of Light and Shadow with Philip and AP, and you guys have been doing those read-alongs and having a great time with those discussions and bringing a lot of light to Janie Wertz's series. And that just wrapped up. You know, she released the last book, but you know, you're coming towards the end. There's a light at the end of that tunnel, and what's on the horizon of that tunnel?
So this is the reason I've been so slow going with it when it comes to fantasy lately, is because that series just takes a toll. Like it takes a lot of time to read. It's not easy reading, but I do want to eventually get back to Realm of the Elderlings. I finished Farseer like how many years ago now, and I want to pick up Live Ship. It's been a while. So I need to pick up Realm of the Elderlings. I need to continue with that. That's probably priority number 1. I keep saying that, but then I keep not reading it. And then the other series is Tad Williams. I need to read some Tad Williams. I've read one standalone novella by him, and that's it. So I need to read his series. Those are the big ones I can think of. I do want to pick up Durfee's series at some point, like The Forgetting Moon. I have that book on my shelf. I still haven't gotten to that. So there are quite a bit. Oh, Book of the New Sun. I really want to read that. You did get me excited about that this year.
Yeah, I am very much a big fan of Book of the New Sun. And I know that I was kind of interjected into that read along with Philip and John and everyone. But honestly, I feel like you should be in that read along because it's your first time. And I think getting a female's perspective is like a really good idea because like there's a lot of misogyny in the books. So I think having a female reader there would be great. So honestly, I think I'm going to hit you with the hot tag. Boom, tag you in. And I think I might have to let you take my spot. I feel like that would be a good thing. You know what I want to read is Terra Ignota by Ada Palmer. I've had
such great things about that.
I've had so many people recommend it to me, and I like Ada Palmer. I've read stuff that she has said in interviews, and her forward for Book of the New Sun is phenomenal. And for me, I really would love to get to that maybe next year. There's also Mage's Blood or whatever. I can't remember the guy's name. There's a couple of series on my list. None of them are notable, I think, in the zeitgeist right now. But I have quite a few epic fantasy series that I'm still like kind of itching to get to. And obviously Rune Lords is up there, at least the first part of Rune Lords. I'm not going to read the second era or whatever because it's not finished and I heard it sucked. I'm going to read the first one. But, I got to be honest with you, Johanna. I would just like to see what this ACOTAR thing's all about.
Nice. Yes.
I just want to have an opinion.
Yeah. I read book one and I was honestly not into it. I think I told you about that.
David Hare.
Um,
Thank you, Alan.
oh, yes. I've heard
Yeah.
about that series. So I would be very curious to hear your thoughts, but I hear that book two is where it really gets exciting.
Yeah, and there's still things like throughout, like, so Kelsey enjoys them a lot, but she's like, oh yeah, like there's definitely stuff in there that's eye rolly, and like, there's a repetition of some of the like, she's like, sure. She's like, but
Yeah.
I have opinions about it. I like the characters. Like, there's things about it that are interesting. So I'm kind of just curious to see how it goes, and I want to have Kelsey on more, and I would like to be able to talk with her on those as she's reading through A Song of Ice and Fire. So we're kind of like trading series, But I'm just so excited, Johanna, for next month. I'm going to read Tad's fourth book, most anticipated release of the year. And then in December, I'll read the Stormlight 5. And then come January, I'm free.
Oh, nice.
You know what I
Oh my
mean?
God.
Like I got
Yes.
nothing. I got nothing on the plate. And what the hell? I might just read 6 David Mitchell books in a row. I don't know. I might do
I
it.
love that. Yeah. It's funny because we were talking a couple of years ago and you were telling me, you're like, I feel like I've read most of the fantasy I want to read. Remember that? And then
Yes,
now that completely changed
it completely
after all your
changed. And there's a lot of stuff that has come into my view that is like not considered fantasy or not in like the sphere that I really like. Like, I want to continue Mary Gentle's Ash series, even with the complaints I had about it. I would still, the plot is so bad, like out of this world crazy. Like, I have to see how that wraps up. Many Colored Land. I need to go back and read book 2 of that. So like, those are series. Everyone teasing about book 1s, and I agree. But there are series that I'm legitimately interested in continuing on. Black Company's obviously one I got to finish up. I think me and Alan were supposed to buddy read that, but I never heard anything from him about it. So I just paused and haven't continued because he told me to read The Silver Spike, and I did. And then I just didn't hear back from Alan. Very strange. But there's some other stuff out there that I'm kind of excited to. It's stuff that I'm literally like blanking on the name of. It's pretty obscure.
Yeah.
But I'm very excited about that. And also, I mean, sci-fi, I've read so little sci-fi compared to my fantasy reading. I got to catch up in that as well.
Ah, yes. I've been really into sci-fi this year. A lot of people were pointing that out to me. They're like, you've been reading a lot of sci-fi. In fact, I think this last wrap up, I could be wrong about this, but I think my last wrap up no, I guess I had one before that. I was going to say this last wrap up might have been the first wrap up I had in which I didn't have a sci-fi book in there, but I think I did have another one earlier this year that didn't. But yeah, I've been really enjoying sci-fi, and there are several sci-fi series I want to read. So the list goes on and on. And I still want to read Fire and Blood. Is that what it's called? Is it Blood and Fire? Oh
No,
my God.
Fire and Blood. Fire and Blood.
Ah, okay. I have to make sure I get that wrong. The one
And,
by George R. R. Martin.
and I think that you should absolutely read Fire and Blood as soon as you possibly can. That would be a good buddy read for you and Alan, actually.
I've been wanting, yes, I would love to read that with you, Alan, if you're in the chat, or you're in the chat, if you want to read it with me.
Also, we're going to have some new Erickson books soon, so I'm also very excited about that. I want to read Carcana so bad, but I've heard it's so dense that I'm going to read that straight through, so I got to wait till it's finished. I'm buying them, but like I need to wait till they're finished till I start them. Yana Rose, I'm not sure, reads, should I try to start a channel? Yes. Why not? It's free.
Yes.
It's literally free. Just pick up your phone and do it. You don't have to have all the fancy stuff or anything. Just get out there and connect with somebody about books that you love.
Yeah.
I think that's pretty great. Brett wants to know, have you read Sun Eater, Johanna?
I haven't. No, I haven't. But I've been slightly curious to read Book of the New Sun first because I understand it's been so influential on Sun Eater. And I know you don't have to. But because it has been such a huge influence on Rakio, I feel like my brain would go crazy wanting to know where the influences are if I read Sun Eater. So I'm curious to read Book of the New Sun first, I think.
Yeah, I read Book of the New Sun after, but retrospectively can match. I'm sure there's more stuff now. There's certain kind of crazy plot things I was waiting for Sun Eater, and like I'm really invested in what happens with it. And I'm thinking that maybe possibly I have some of the answers from Book of the New Sun, depending if he uses that as influence. So it is definitely like Dune and that, I think, are well worth your time to read. And another person that Rakia loves is Lois McMaster Bujold. And I've only read Cursed Chalian. and I need to read Paladin of Souls. And I would love to get to her sci-fi stuff too, but Paladin of Souls just sounds really good. And I've had it personally recommended to me a bunch. So I'm very curious about getting to that.
If I ever read Bejeweled, I would just have to be okay with not like feeling like I need to complete her series because I think all her series, right, both that one and the sci-fi series are super, super long, like several books.
Well, I
Am I
think
wrong about
the
that?
fantasy ones aren't that long. And also, I think it's just a lot of novellas. There's like a ton of novellas that she has.
Ah,
But they're
okay.
all like they can all I don't know about her sci-fi, but the fantasy stuff from what I understand, basically you can read them as standalones and they're all in the same universe type deal.
Oh,
I
that's
think
fine.
maybe similar to Basslag in some ways with China Mieville, but you and Alan would both love Curse of Chalion. You both would
Oh,
love it. I'm
Alan,
100% positive.
read it with me.
Yeah, that would be a good buddy read for you. I would be shocked if you and Alan didn't like it. Like I'm not saying that Alan and you will like absolutely love it, but you will get something out of it and you'll want to talk about it, I think.
Yeah. I feel like Alan and I have some similar crossover in our taste, so yeah,
Yeah, it's probably why
that's
we're
fun.
that's why we're
Yeah,
friends.
of course.
And her sci-fi is very long, and I did know that, and people are confirming it in the chat, but that is true. But Bejeweled is just so well respected. I just read Benjamin Lyre's The Failures, and he mentions Tad and a bunch of other influences, but one of them was Bejeweled, and I always think that's cool when people point out Bejeweled because it's so underrepresented in the mainstream of fantasy and sci-fi. You just don't see it mentioned as much out
It's
and
so
about.
true.
Yeah,
Yes, and I
absolutely.
really wanna read more Le Guin. I know we talked people were saying I needed to build up The Dispossessed for you. I really love that book. I specifically love books that explore 2 alternate cultures or societies and then show the challenges in both societies. I think that the way she did that in The Dispossessed was brilliant. It would just brought up so many interesting questions and conflicts, internal conflicts for the character, but then also broader societal questions and themes. So I would love to read more from Le Guin, specifically her sci-fi. I think
Yeah, I
maybe someday or
the word for world is forced is probably the next one, and then I'll probably read the dispossessed. I'm also going to be reading more Octavia Butler for sure in the
Yes,
future too.
which so I have, Kindred, one of my favorite standalones of all time, but I also have Dawn on my shelf. I got that for my birthday, so I think that's gonna be my next Butler. What Butler are you planning to read next?
Probably Parable of Talents. Actually, I'm probably just going to
Oh,
read the sequel because I have things about Parable of Sower I don't quite like, and I think that it might be book one issues. So I need to read. I know she didn't finish it, but I need to see if any of it's resolved in book two, where she takes some of the stuff because there's just some of the stuff in great book. I loved it, but I did have things that I was like in conversation with that I was like, maybe I didn't like this as much. But where is she going? And maybe I'll never know. Maybe she doesn't resolve it in book two, and then I'll just forever be out on it. But I did enjoy it quite a bit. I like Kindred a lot more. I can say that.
mm,
I'll talk about it in my wrap up stream, really in depth. Paul actually chimed in with really good information. I want to highlight this. Said Chalion is 3 novels. We're talking about Bejeweled here. Chalion is 3 novels, but there are like 15 novellas in the same world as a different series. Uh, I always just try to avoid saying this word. Vorko Segan, I don't know, is like 16 books or something. You can 100% read just Shards of Honor and Barrier. I don't know. As a duology, though, it's really easy to break up. So very good to
okay.
know.
That is good to know. Thank you so much for letting us know that, Paul.
Yes, absolutely. I did read Peril of the Sower with Rebecca, and she was not a fan. Well, I shouldn't say she didn't
Oh.
hate it. I think she might have hated parts of it. I was higher than her on it, but I still did have more positive things to say about Kindred, I think. So,
Speaking of Rebecca, she did a video on banned books and what goes into that, and it was a really interesting topic. So, thank you, Rebecca, for making that video because I don't feel like I have a lot of awareness about that topic.
yeah. Dawn is definitely one I'm also very interested in reading from
Yes.
what I know what it's about. So another thing, I've been reading post-apocalyptic stuff because I'm like, I love this. Why don't I read more of it? So that's going to continue. But there are some other things that I really, really love that I am going to be getting into. That I'm just going to find books that fit that and be like, I'm going to read this. So that's one of the missions for next year. And I know that it's Friday and I'm taking up all your time, but I had to talk about this on the stream. So I started a show called From, and it was on Amazon Prime. and I'm going to complain about Amazon Prime in just a second. But it was on Amazon Prime. Now it's on MGM Plus. But it is essentially a group of people who are all driving and they run into a tree in the road. And then when they go by it, they get stuck in this loop and it's just one town. And then at night, these like almost like they're not vampires, but like vampiric monsters come out at night and try to get into the house and you have to let them in. Typical vampire thing, but they're not vampires from what I can tell. I might be wrong. And they don't know why they're there. It isn't all the same road. They're all from all over the place in America. And they're all trapped in this thing. And you know what I love? I love a bottled setting. I love that. I love the why are we all here trope. You know, and it is from the co-producers of Lost. I know Lost had a bad ending. I don't care. I love the premise of that. And this show, folks, this show is so bad. Like the writing, and I don't usually say these type of things because I think I'm an idiot. But the writing is so corny at times and cheesy. And the acting is suspect at best. The main character is actually the guy in a wheelchair from Oz, who I love. He's one of the only people on the show that has like a really good performance. But it is like the acting and the writing is okay at best. Like it is rough. The premise is sick. And when they do the horror bits, because it's like sci-fi horror, when they do the horror bits, they are so well done. Like there's one dude in that writing room and one dude on set. And they're like, hey, we need the horror guy. And he's just the rock star. Like they spent the whole budget on him. And he does it so damn well. Well, Tom said, I've not heard anything negative about From yet. I'm sorry. I don't know. I think the writing is not great.
Oh, no.
There's some stuff that doesn't make sense. I'm not talking about like the premise. But like you would just have to go see. If you were saying, I thought you were going to say it's an underappreciated masterpiece. I'm not deterring you all from watching it. I'm saying go watch it. It's ridiculously interesting. And one thing that it's doing really well is the mystery, when they add on to it, isn't getting less interesting. You know, when you start getting answers or you find out more, you're like, oh, okay. No. It's getting more compelling. And I'm like, there's almost no way that this is going to end well. Like there's no way they can deliver on all the mystery. It's going to suck. The ending's going to suck. I don't care. I'm along for the ride. Now I'm going to tell you what pissed me off. And I had to give this rant because I don't talk to anyone in my life. So this is where I get out my feelings.
Go for it.
Except for Kelsey. Poor Kelsey. Johanna, I'm watching on Amazon Prime. I'm in the middle of season 1. The next day, no, I paused it. I paused at 11:30 p.m., middle of the episode. I started back up at like 12:15 after midnight. I have lost access to it because it has now over midnight switched today and it moved itself to MGM Plus. What? Yeah. Amazon has another streaming. They bought MGM. So now they have another streaming service that's $6.99 on top of that. And I'm like, I was in the middle of an episode and you restricted my access. I just about fired up the old Plex server for those who know anything about torrenting. I was furious. I was so mad.
Oh, I'd be so mad. Yeah.
And then I was going to buy it. It was $25 to buy a season of a show with relatively bad writing. Like, yeah, it's just like so frustrating. It's so frustrating.
That's
and
messed up. I didn't even know they could do that. That's so screwed
they
up.
did. They sure did. And it pissed me off so bad. But I will say if you watch, someone else got to watch it with me and just and reaffirm to me that it isn't just, they're just trying to throw in all the emotional beats, you know, like, just like, oh, what can we get to make them feel bad? Here, throw that in. And it makes like no sense. I shouldn't even say it makes no sense. It just doesn't land. It's so manufactured. You're like, this is trash, dude. Who pauses in the middle episode? Have you ever had the munchies, Gavin? Have you ever had the munchies? That's how.
I do this all the time. I always pause. My husband and I watch stuff together. We can never get through a single thing together, except for House of the Dragon. Somehow we did, but
very based. Very
So
based
good.
of you. And yes, Tom, Amazon
Very
does own MGM. And yes, they created a whole nother streaming service whenever Prime barely has enough shows to justify their pricing with the no ads. Very annoying to me.
That is annoying.
Doug Seth, I don't think I've seen you in a live chat, so welcome. And if you have been, I apologize. I get the feeling that Jimmy would really like Miles. He's a frenetic approach to everything. Seems like it would work well. Miles who?
Yeah, Miles Davis. No, just kidding.
Miles, I'm thinking Miles Garrett, the defensive player of the year last year. Doug, let me know in the comments of this video who Miles is, and I would love if you think I'd get along with him. Maybe he's trolling me and it's actually like someone I would despise or something, but I would love to know. So folks, go check out Miles from Bejolde's Sci-Fi series. Thank you. Thank you.
Oh, okay.
Oh, there it is. Thank you, Doug. I appreciate it. I plan on reading her sci-fi stuff without a doubt. Brent says, here's something similar that pisses me off. Why does renting a movie on streaming cost $20 to $30 when there is no physical media or brick or mortar overhead? Because okay, I'll just relax because I get very upset. I get very upset about this. It makes me irate because I'm willing to pay for things. Like, I won't go the pirate route. I will pay for things, but you're taking advantage. Like, you're at this point, you're just rubbing my nose in it. I can't stand it.
Awful.
Yeah, I mean, it's the same thing with ebooks. I keep saying I'm going to become an ebook girly, and I can't become a Kindle girly because ebooks are $16.99, Johanna.
So expensive. It's ridiculous. Yeah, if the ebook is as expensive as the paperback, that makes no sense.
Just go to your library. Just get I'm sorry, Never Let Me Go's on a 78-year hold on ebook. Yeah. It's an ebook. Copy and paste it. Just copy and paste it. Give it to me. It makes no sense. Now, I know, by the way, I think Rebecca's talked about this. There's like a reason for it I know. I'm being entertaining. Okay. I'm losing my mind. I'm hungry. Johanna, I've taken up 2.5 hours of your life that you're never going to get back. So how do you feel about that?
That sounds like a normal day. So
I mean, what else would you be singing or playing a Beat Saber or something, right?
That's right. So.
I got you, didn't I? Johanna,
this was great.
This was
great.
Thank
you so much for having me.
You should have me back on Why Read. I was only on ever once, and you've never invited me back, which is really rude. You've been on the show plenty of times. I don't understand why this is such an uneven relationship, and it makes me very upset. Rebecca is right. It's a publisher's fault, not the libraries. Support your local libraries. Just to be clear, I support libraries. I hate corporate greed. Johanna, invite me back on your channel sometime, please. Do you have anything to plug? No, Why Read's tomorrow.
Why Read is tomorrow. I'm having Why Read with a Buddhist monk. His channel's name is From the Depths, but I just thought it'd be fun to put in the title that he's a Buddhist monk because he is, but he happens to be a booktuber. And what did Gavin say? I missed that.
He said, Johanna said, let's do another 2.5 hours. She's got to have some juice in the batteries for tomorrow, though. I mean, so I thought the Buddhist monk thing was honestly going to be BellTube, and he shaved his head, and he was going to show up in a toga robe. That's what I thought. I really did. I thought that was what it was going to be. So it's you're having a legitimate Buddhist monk on to try to outpiece Philip.
He lives in a monastery. Like, he's a monk in a monastery. Isn't that crazy?
Oh my God.
He's a really interesting guy. And so I'm going to have him on. And I'm also having Philip Chase on with him because Philip obviously has a lot of Buddhist influences on his channel, on his t-shirts, but also in his series. And so I thought that'd be a really fun discussion.
You should ask the monk just absurdly stupid questions. Like, so who are your top 10 fantasy crushes? Like, that's what you should be doing. I think that's the content I want. I will be trolling in the chat if I'm available tomorrow. I will try not to make the monk dude feel I feel so rude. I feel like I'm like mocking his title. I'm not.
I think people would be surprised. I think people would be surprised how open-minded and gracious he is. Like, he's awesome. I am a big fan of his channel right now. I think he's criminally undersubscribed. I think he has I want to say he has a very low subscriber count. I'll say that. But I think he talks about books extremely well and has some really interesting topic videos.
So if you have ever wanted to see Philip Chase awkwardly interact with a monk, you have your opportunity tomorrow live on Why Read over at Johanna's channel. Make sure that you're liked and subscribe, all of that good stuff. That'll be a banger. I'm definitely going to be watching that for at least the first 15 minutes to say some horrible things in the chat. I'm very, very excited about it. Johanna, you're always a pleasure. You're an absolute grand person. And I'm so happy to call you my friend. I'm so happy that we get to talk books all the time on and offline. But if you do not invite me back on Why Read within the next 3 months, you can consider all this null and void. Okay.
All right.
I will take down every one of these episodes. But sincerely, thank you for your time. I appreciate you. Folks, go check out Johanna's channel. I hope I probably didn't link in the description below because I'm still getting used to setting it up through this, but you should go check out her channel. I'll try to remember to put the link in. Johanna, where can people find you? Do you want people to follow you on Instagram? Or are you good?
I think the channel is the best place. I do have my Instagram linked on my channel. I am very boring on Instagram. I do post in my stories, but that's about it these days. Every once in a while, I'll do a post. But yes, Johanna Reads. So that's at Johanna_reads on YouTube. Best place to find me. I'd love to interact with you there. Thank you so much. And thank you so much for having me again, Jimmy. This has been an absolute pleasure. I will have you back on Why Read. I've thought about this for a while. You just know how I am. I'm so particular about like I have to have the right person with the right person, but I will have you back for sure. Now everybody's going to volunteer. Can I be on Why Read with Jimmy? There, I put it out there.
I don't want to know. I don't want to know to the day I'm there. How about that?
Oh, wow.
Yeah. I like doing things live. I like doing things on the spot. That's what gets me up in the morning.
That would be an interesting Why Read. Okay.
Yes, it would. I look forward to it, and I'm sure everyone in the audience does as well. Chat, thank you for being here. Thank you for being the third guest. As always, you are what makes this thing work, and I very much appreciate you spending your Friday night here. If you love the video, think about subscribing if you haven't before, and also liking it. We're at 69 likes, so we could honestly stay right there, but if you are so inclined, you can hit like. It helps people find the video after the fact. There's a Patreon description. It's optional, but always appreciated. Until we see you next time, be good, be safe, and remember to always keep turning the page.